Welcome back to another episode with the Occult Book Club, number 7, if I'm correct. I'm pretty sure it's number 7 because the last one we did was the Book of Werewolves. If you haven't checked that one out, go ahead and check it out. We get into all things werewolves, which is pretty interesting. That was really fun one. We did that one live, didn't we? I
think so, yeah.
That was
one
of
of
the
the party
live
one.
Yeah. So yeah, we had Gabe and Romy and everybody for it. But yeah, make sure to check me out on social media at the 101 Podcast. The101podcast.com to get your copy of the Occultist Monday. If you're going to enjoy this episode today, you're going to enjoy what we're putting out on these. The November issue should be out here by tomorrow or something. I'm almost done with it. And the Chosen Juan comic book versus the Saturnian Cube. The101podcast.com. Check out Paranoid American. Get the Paranoid American pamphlet. This is, I guess, the old design or something like that, right? Or is this a sampler size, right?
No, that's the OG one. That's the one that everyone should have. That format that you've got there, that little one. There just happens to be one on Amazon too, because getting those little pamphlets into Amazon warehouse and the whole logistics of it. Long story short, it sucks.
Oh, really? Was that the reasoning behind the size change?
Yeah, so Amazon, they only let you go down to a very certain size. I think it's like 6 by 6 inches, or you can't go down a whole lot smaller than that, and it has to be like a square. Like they don't, and those ones that you've got, that one that you just held up, I think it's 3.5 by 2 inches, which is like the OG Chick Track size, and that's what it's based on.
Interesting.
And I could get those on Amazon, but I'd have to send them to Amazon and then pay Amazon to store them in their storage facility, and then it's just like a whole extra layer to it that I just don't want to get into yet.
Yeah, we pay the lizards enough money, so any more money that goes towards them, I think we should hold off. You want to plug your stuff, Thomas, before we get into it?
Yeah, paranoidamerican.com, at Paranoid American on Instagram, and there is a newly launched Paranoid American Patreon where you can get some, eventually there'll be a game demo on there for a new Steam game. Before it's even in early access, you'll be able to get access to that. And a whole bunch of new comics coming out that I'm only going to post on Patreon. And I just, the end of November? Yeah, beginning of November. I just launched a whole bunch of new stickers on the site. I don't know if there's one of them made by Bags Draws, a little Bohemian Grove playset sticker. But we've got Bohemian Grove ones, an inflatable Moloch, friend toy. And we've got some World's Fair Plaster of Paris, a little Tartaria sticker. So just a whole bunch of stuff. Check that out on the Etsy shop, linked on paranoidamerican.com.
Did you see that new design that I'm working on?
The homunculus design, right?
It's so amazing, bro.
It's gonna be good.
It's gonna be great. You like it though, right? Like the outline, that was just a rough sketch you sent me.
Well, I saw the one that you sent me with a little number 1 next to it, which implied that there were some other ones on there that I didn't get to see yet.
There was other ones, but I went with number 1, bro. It's a spoiler. I went with number 1.
Yep.
So we'll see. That'll be out soon. New shirt design, and we're actually gonna be reading what birthed the the homunculus idea when we were diving into an all-seeing eye for Occult Book Club number 3 or 4 or something like that. And these are a series of monthly magazines that were written, edited, and compiled by Manly P. Hall from like the 1920s to what, the 90s or 80s, right, bro? I mean, they go deep.
Yeah, well, at least the website that we're tracking them off of ends in winter of 1990. So
That's
they went from
wild, dude.
Yeah, they went from the 1923 into the 90s.
And do you believe that it was him doing all the writing, dude? Because this guy was so prolific. There's no way, bro. How are you gonna find so much time? Because I mean, you with your background, Thomas, in this whole, I know you've helped design magazines and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he was actually writing all of it, or because this is crazy, dude? The amount of writing that he did, if he actually did write everything.
I mean, it would be surprising if he wrote the whole thing. But I mean, the front of every single cover says a monthly magazine written, edited, and compiled by Manly P. Hall. But you will notice as you go through some of these, every once in a while, he'll kind of restate something from like an older manuscript It'll be a translation. So he knows how to add a little bit of filler. He's always got a couple of little like jokes in there. And I'm not sure if the ongoing fictional stories were 100% him and no one else, or not. I haven't really looked into him enough. But I mean, it's enough for him to be prolific, regardless of how much he was involved in every single article.
Mm-hmm.
I think as we go on, we might see some other names slip in, but who knows?
Yeah, and we could pull some stuff up, because my whole thing was, what I don't like about Manly P. Hall is he doesn't really cite his sources. You know what I mean? That's the only thing that I've never liked about Manly P. Hall, where he puts out
It's the trust me, bro. So
it's
the original.
Yeah, where he just puts out a bunch of crazy stuff. You're like, wow, this is wild. I wonder where he got it from. Good luck, because you're not. At least I'm not able to find it. Because being a researcher, right? I don't know about you, bro, but when I hear something crazy that sounds too good to be true, like whatever, XYZ was a lizard person, I go, wow, that's wild. I wonder where he got that from. And you start looking of where they got it from and you can't find it. I don't repeat it again because I don't have the source material. You know what I mean? I don't know about you.
That doesn't sound too true. I've heard you repeat some things that I'm not sure you could dig up sources for. But I think in this issue in particular, or in this volume, right, the volume 2 that had 6 issues, so it was every 2 months for this particular year. But he does make some pretty matter of fact claims, especially in the Q&A sections. And you know, at a certain point, you just have to accept that there's not like a source that he's going to be dropping on you, but there's absolutely enough in some of the things that he gets into for you to like find your own way. And one of the questions was like, what books do you recommend? And he, unbelievably, I thought he was just going to start listing off all of his own books, but this is so early on that he hasn't gotten a chance to write all of his books yet. So he had to recommend other people's books. So that one was kind of eye-opening.
So yeah, for those that haven't caught on, we're doing the All-Seeing Eye Volume 2, number 1 through 6, and we're going to be going through these one by one and picking out what we like the most. I'm not a big fan of the short stories too much, but there's some other good stuff in there that we can cover. I'm going to pull up. If you guys want to read along with us, either follow the screen, or I'll post the link to where you can get copies of all these, because these are great stuff to read. I mean, it's occult topics, and how you said he puts in like some comedy in there every now and again. So here we go. Thomas, you want to lead the way with the first one? I know you hit me up about this particular thing here, and this is...
Yeah, I didn't know what it was, honestly, and I had it wasn't easy to just Google, you know, like, what do you Google if you're trying to figure out what this thing is, you know? 12 bricks, 12 gold bars, and I was trying to see, is it like Solomon's Temple and representative columns? No, that wasn't it. There was but anyways, in issue 6 of the second volume, he actually breaks this down in one of the last articles. So
nice.
If you're also interested, you had a great guess that it was a chocolate bar, and this actually looks like a
Willy Wonka.
It definitely looks like a gold chocolate bar, so that wasn't too far off.
Well, who knows where the inspiration came from, right? Because a dice, the reason a dice is not because it works well, but because that form, the cube, they say imprints itself the best in the psyche. So that, again, that's something I read somewhere sometime, dude. I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you even realize this, but Manly P. Hall breaks down dice in this volume at some point.
Really? Oh, I didn't catch that one.
He basically mentions how the...
All right, be quiet, Thomas. Let's start from number 1, all right? Because you're getting too ahead of yourself, bro. Here we are. And then one thing that stood out to me is this magazine is not sold. Why is he like saying that it's not sold?
So he doesn't have like a whole publishing setup or anything right now. He doesn't have distributors. He doesn't have everything lined up. But if you notice, he even mentions that the books that are available, you have to buy them through like this mail order. So like, you know, almost nothing that he has at this point is actually being sold yet.
This is early Manly P. Hall, bro. This is 20s Manly P. Hall. This is before he even wrote the Secret Teaching of All Ages.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in issue 2.
Yeah. You see, I know you caught it, bro. I know you caught it. So here we are. Where do you want to start? Because I highlighted the abstractions, and I know that you highlighted almost the exact same thing I did.
Yeah, well, so you read that one because that's exactly the same part that I highlighted.
So, abstractions, one of the greatest curses that confronts the students of occult philosophy is his inability to get any real information, which is true. He is flooded with concepts and abstractions, but not one of them is capable of solving the practical problem. And I don't know what other part you put in there, but
And then, well, I've got, it continues on of, there's no greater abstraction on the face of the earth than the word truth, which covers every doctrine and misquotation known to man. And that we're told that truth is the answer to the problem, but we are never told what truth is. And that those that claim to have it demonstrate only an abstract condition which cannot possibly be true because it doesn't answer any problem, solve any difficulty, nor educate the human mind in any practical way. So this is basically just the people and the gurus and anyone that acts like they've found enlightenment or they've found like the secret or they've found like the perfect anything. Unless you can 100% demonstrate it and teach it to someone else so that that other person can also have that same ability, then it's technically not a truth. So I don't know, and I think I really liked that he opened it up on this one, but also because it's a little hypocritical. Because as like you go on, and just like you said, sometimes he doesn't cite the sources, and he'll make like an outrageous claim, or he'll just mention like a link between two
yeah.
things, and you'll wonder, is that just something that he fabricated? Did he read it somewhere else, and where did he read it? So that, I mean, again, it's like this magazine, he's good at kind of skirting between of saying like, well, I'm not professing the truth, I'm just kind of like laying it all out there. But we'll see. So specifically when he gets to the Q&A sections, we'll see that he does think that he's got some kind of truth, at least in some context.
What are your thoughts on that, bro? What are your ideas on secret societies and everything else aside? What are your ideas on what enlightenment actually is? Like, what does that concept mean to you when you're reading about all this occult stuff? Because he's absolutely right. A lot of things you read, sometimes, bro, I'll be super deep in some rabbit hole somewhere, and I'll just think to myself, what is this all for? You know what I mean? Is it just for the podcast? What am I doing here? You know what I mean? You have you gotten that sometimes where?
Yeah, I mean, I have like a really simple yokel version of it, but it's like, I think the default state that if there was no society and we were just born and there was no books or no teaching, we were just humans being born into the world, we would just default into kind of very animalistic behavior. I don't think that there would, like, you wouldn't just naturally start developing a society and language and knowledge and everything. We would just kind of be animals. So whatever that thing is that like you can foster that brings you from that animalistic state into kind of like a higher consciousness state of humanity and just passing on knowledge, like that doesn't just inherently happen by itself. So I think that there might not be enlightenment in the same way that a lot of these books preach it, but there is the exact opposite of that pure animalistic state. There's something that, if that's one end of the spectrum, then the other far end of the spectrum is probably what a lot of these people are preaching to, like the ideal version of, which you might never hit that 100%, civilized on the scale, but striving towards that. Maybe that's kind of what all of this is about.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. That's actually, yeah, you put that really nice. And because I think about it, dude. Like today, I was driving down the road, and I'm just looking around at the trees and everything, and I'm focusing on driving, but I'm looking around. I go, sometimes I think, bro, is it all bullshit? Is it all this spiritual?
A hard right off this bridge and just end it all right now.
I'm sure. I mean, we've all had those thoughts, right? Where it's like, what would happen if I jump like you picture yourself like jumping off, right? You've done that before, haven't you? I mean, I'm not the only one, right?
Or especially like as a kid, like thinking like, if I could just open that door right now, I would just fly out of this car. It would just be all over.
So I'm like thinking, I go, what if there isn't so I was thinking about how there are unexplainable things. I was thinking about the paranormal. I think I might have been listening to something, but the idea that there are things that we can't explain, but is it paranormal? Is it a parallel dimension, or is it a fabric of our imagination? Now, okay, now I know what I was thinking about. I was thinking about my wife. She told me that somebody in the community on Facebook posted about how their kids every night at the same time were screaming in their room about how I think they were saying something like no more children, something like that. These little kids. And she was asking about if anybody knew anyone that could, I think, do an exorcism or something like that, or purge the house or something, because she's tried sage and she's tried everything else, and it doesn't seem to work for the kids, because every single night at the very same time the kids freak out about something that they're seeing. And I thought, I've just been playing around with the idea of like the paranormal. Is it actually something, or is it a fabric of our imaginations? Did people back then, when the earliest civilizations, were they also experiencing poltergeist activity or something? Is it a parallel dimension, or is it all, what I'm saying? Like, is it all bullshit?
We've gone over this I think it's all bullshit, to be honest, man. Just because like, if you had a graph of like how often it's reported and how important those claims tend to be in what people believe, versus the introduction of video and camera, like, as those two things meet, like the introduction of camera and video almost invalidated. So then I've never heard a convincing enough argument of like, well, ever since everyone has a video camera in their pocket now, this is why ghost sightings are less frequent as opposed to more frequent.
I got you.
And it's always like, oh, the ghosts know that the camera's out to capture their soul, so they're hiding behind, that old piano. They don't come out and scare you anymore. They're hiding from you because they don't want to have their soul captured by the camera. But I mean, there's no real good example. And the same for exorcisms, right? I don't know if you've ever tried to like track down the actual exorcist videos, but I mean, some of them just kind of range from obviously fake to ones where you just kind of end up feeling bad for the people involved.
Yeah, there's cases where people were starved to death, bro, where they were like malnourished and neglected, and they died from that, not from some demonic possession. But it's just something I was thinking about, because there are phenomena that we don't know, that we can't explain. Like, what is ball lightning? I'm sure there's an explanation, but weird stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like weird stuff like that. Like a ball lightning. Imagine you're walking in the Everglades one day and you're looking around and there's like just a ball of lightning just coming towards you. You'd freak out. You wouldn't know what to think. If you're some Indian back then, bro, you're in the wilderness. Is that racist to say? Some Indian back then?
No, and you know what else was interesting? Because we were talking about doing some deep dives on Florida recently.
Or we're gonna do deep dives.
And see, this is like when all my conventional knowledge comes from Google and Wikipedia and basically just skimming the surface, but it's all like Western academia. That's the source of like 90% of, most of the research, especially when it comes into Florida. But one of the interesting notes was that pretty much none of the Native Americans that lived here in Florida had any sort of written language. Every single thing was just all verbal communication. They didn't have, they didn't have any written documents of any kind. So when you would talk about seeing like some kind of crazy ball lightning, there's no other path for it to take other than that game of telephone where the dude comes back from the Everglades and he's describing this ball lightning, and then his buddy tells someone else about it, and that guy tells, you know what I mean? But you can almost see, like, if you don't actually have any sort of written document that doesn't change and it's the same every time someone reads it, just imagine like how wildly those things can spin out. And Manly P. Hall, I think, actually mentions in one of these issues here how a lot of certain cultures talked almost exclusively in metaphors because of this exact sort of phenomena where they didn't have written languages. So metaphors just made everything easier, because if everyone just talked in terms of nature and weather and gods, then they could share the same words as, normal things.
Or at least the same symbols, right? I mean, that's
exactly. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The universal language, which is mathematics. They talk about that being the universal language. And yeah, it's really interesting. I was just thinking about that today, about how it might all be bullshit, and this isn't even a simulation. It's just life, and we try to connect dots where there's no dots to be connected. But that's just me, dude.
so he's got a couple other quotes in this abstractions that I'll read out.
Go ahead.
Because I think that they kind of emphasize what we're just talking about. So one of them says that we know people who have realizations and who are living in the light and who are saved. And when they say these things, they say everything, for they couldn't explain the process to save their own neck. And they've accepted some sort of mental aphorism or tied themselves to a parrot-like concept and use it as the basis of their salvation. And we're very sorry for them, but they don't seem to be very sorry for themselves, so we can't do anything else for them. So he's mentioning
fire,
that, like,
bro.
like even if you've got your positive affirmation mantras, and I think one of his examples was like everything's fine, everything's going to be fine every day. I'm getting better and smarter and greater. And he kind of is saying in a subtle way, like, sometimes that's bullshit. Sometimes that's not actually true. And you're just telling yourself that. And if you keep telling yourself that, it's not actually a good thing. Which I don't know. It's funny because he's got this equal mixture of positivity, but also being very critical.
Like blunt.
Not just blunt, but very critical about it. And as you know about his life as he goes on, some of this sounds very hypocritical in retrospect. But
Yeah.
I mean, this being the second volume of the first thing that he ever really kind of like committed to writing consistently, you can see he's very ambitious here. But then he mentions another thing. It says, there's no greater abstraction in the world than to say, believe in God. I've never met anyone who has the slightest idea of what God is, and not one in a million knows the mental alchemy which must be passed in order to hatch such a belief. So I like this one. I can't remember which comedian. I want to say it's Doug Stanhope, but he's got this bit where it's like, if you had never heard of the Bible before, you've never heard of Jesus, you never heard of God, the Old Testament, just none of it. You know what I mean? Like just a normal day, and you know everything you know now, but there's just no such thing as the Bible. And you walk into a bookstore and you pull out the Bible on a shelf and you just start thumbing through it. Like, would you actually pick up on it and say, like, hey, this book's actually making a lot of good points. I think this might be the legitimate origin of life and the story of like how we were all created. Or would you just kind of think like, oh, that's a kind of a weird, old, outdated fiction story, and just kind of plop it back on the shelf? So I think there's a little bit of sort of like relation between those two things, where the mental alchemy that it requires to even conjure up the entire system of religion, that most people, when they say they believe in God, it's really just that they've figured out a way that they can fit themselves into that pattern and kind of like live, nicely with it.
Yikes. Yeah. And I agree with that. He's calling people, and that's why I'm asking you about the whole is it all bullshit thing, because of things just like that, where it's like, are you conjuring this up yourself, or was it an actual thing? Because some people eat, live, breathe, and die by certain beliefs, by these abstractions, right? By these things that they will never be flat Earth. They're never going to be able to prove it. But the math is there, Thomas. The math. You got to trust the math.
I think that argument is unique, though, man. I mean, the flat Earth argument, because it's not really about flat Earth.
You
the
glober?
Flat Earth argument, to me, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm a glober.
You
but
fucking glober, dude.
But to me, the flat Earth argument is all of history a lie, because that one is way harder to prove, in my opinion, than the curvature of the globe. But if you could prove that, then man, all bets are off. Like, dude, my mind is now open to anything you want to throw at me.
Didn't we just do a deep dive on MK Ultra where literally they try to cover that up and it backfired on them? And if it wouldn't have been uncovered by that secretary, whoever, the assistant that went into the room and found all those boxes, what if they would have burned all those boxes? Imagine the boxes that they did burn, right? And that they have burned. All the emails that have been deleted, that they haven't been able to recover. You know what I'm saying?
Question it'll plague me forever. Like, why didn't they just burn those boxes when they found them? And I can't figure out the answer to that. I mean, we're still talking the 70s, right? So it's not like not like that was all on camera and they had all been scanned and it was on some crypto blockchain and the cat was out of the bag. Like, the cat was not out of the bag. An assistant found him in a room and they could have just, and that's an oversimplification of like all the steps in between. Yeah. But if you think about today, how hard would it be for the CIA to cover its tracks, even with everything we've got going on? Like, they've got it down to a science. Mm-hmm. And I think they had it down to a science then too, but maybe just like everywhere else in the 70s, right? Everyone was just kind of on coke and drunk all the time, so it was a different era.
And this is one of my favorite memes. What year is it? 50 BC. What does BC stand for? Before Christ. It was Christ. No fucking clue, mate. Yeah, I posted that one a really long time ago, and a bunch of people unfollowed me on my Instagram. But hey, it's all good, right? So, did you have anything else on the abstraction one?
No, I'm ready to go for the next.
All right, so here we are with this next section, the message of the great initiates. And this is something that I've talked about before, where all these guys in history and antiquity were just all adepts. Yes, including Jesus Christ was also an adept. So an initiate, an ascended master, if you will. And that's really blasphemous and heretical, but I mean, that's...
And he says later in this series that he believes these were all actual people that walked the earth at some point in history. Every single one of these great minds.
That's one of the interesting things about Manly P. Hall, right? With the whole Atlantean thing. You think he was pushing a psyop, bro? Do you think Atlantis is a psyop, or do you think it's just another thing for people to play around with as far as ideas go? Because it seems that as humans, we like to play these mental gymnastics. I don't know if it's to keep us on our feet, right? To constantly be thinking about something, or at least not everybody cares. Some people don't give a shit about what happened in the past. I know people who literally are just like, what does it matter, dude? What does it matter what the Egyptians were doing? What does it matter what Quetzalcoatl was doing and Hermes Trismegistus?
I mean, at some level, it kind of doesn't. But if you don't care, and nobody cares what Hermes Trismegistus was doing, then like that's kind of the trajectory of back towards sort of just like hitting each other over the head and fighting over a slab of meat. You know what I mean? Like, if
read the first one, bro.
If it's a spectrum, so I've got Hermes was the one too. It says Hermes, the great Atlantean demigod, probably, if not actually, the greatest illuminator of mortal man, taught as key of his philosophy the analogy. And he goes on about analogies in different ways about it. The relationship exists between the inferior and superior being the basis of his doctrine, and the knowledge of the simile was man's first revelation. Hermes is often called the first messenger of God because he's the oldest that we know of, and his law of analogical reasoning is the basis of every philosophy of modern times. The essence of his teaching was that God and man were made in the same mold, and all things in the lower and in the lesser were made after the same pattern in the greater. So this is the as above, so below. But this being the first messenger that kind of brought that down, and essentially that he's saying here that as above, so below is like that analogy portion of the SAT test at the very end, like the word pairings. But that's essentially, Hermetic philosophy.
I think I took the SAT like one time, or it might have been a practice.
Do you remember the word pairings though that I'm talking about?
No, I don't. That's what I'm trying to think, bro. But you're a lot older than me too.
It would be like big is to elephant as small is to, and then it would give you like 4 options.
Thomas's penis, be, small is to.
I got a long story about that one too.
About your penis?
Yeah, we'll get into that and for the Patreon.
Okay, awesome. So we have Orpheus, how do you say that? Grecian? Is that how you say it? Grecian demigod, top man, the law of harmony, and the great work of harmonizing the spiritual and material qualities within his own soul. The 7-string lyre of Orpheus represents the 7 major rates of vibration known to consciousness at this time. Upon these rates of vibration, which are the basis of form, thought, growth, and culture, his philosophy was based. His 7-string lyre lyre, I think it's how you say it, representing the solar system and the 7 centers in the human body. And upon this, he taught man to play the harmony of nature and the music of the spheres. This harmonization of the centers of consciousness was the redemption of the human soul. Eurydice. Interesting. What's Eurydice? What is that?
Eurydice, I think. I think it's a guy's name.
Wow, I'm an idiot. Okay, Eurydice.
And there's something in here that goes kind of unspoken, and that's the concept of categorization, which was like another big quantum leap in sort of like human thought and philosophy, was just figuring out how to categorize things.
He was a character in Greek mythology in the Alunoniad, Auloniad, Auloniad, wife of Orpheus. What does that even mean? There were nymphs who were found in mountain pastures and vales, often in the company of Pan, the god of nature, and who tried to bring her back from the dead with his enchanting music. Interesting.
And this
So,
is that same concept too, right? That like vibration brings matter into being and brings
oh
consciousness
yeah,
into being.
I like that. So he brought her back through. Okay, I get it. Yeah, it's the rebirth from. I'm
Through
gonna.
vibrations and harmony, and when they say harmony too, they also mean the establishment of what like disharmony is. And I think Manly P. Hall at the very end in some other place, he talks about how disharmony is essentially like friction, like the friction that happens when things are not how they're supposed to be.
Right on, right on. I love it. We have here the third one, or the one that you picked. It wasn't. You didn't go with Krishna or
No,
Buddha.
I skipped all the way. Yeah, Krishna, Buddha,
That's
Muhammad.
kind of
Yeah.
racist, bro.
They're all good and all. Like, well, I guess the qualities that he's picking out from Muhammad is just like blind blind faith and like obedience to a god, and then Moses is about just like taking that beating, like when God says I'm gonna drown everyone, just like taking it on the chin. That's essentially, like he says, Moses taught the children of Israel in the ancient world the omnipotence of law, justice without mercy, the impersonality of law. Like, this is basically like, how's that boot taste? That's what he's saying
That
that
those
Moses
who would
taught the world.
break the law are themselves broken upon it. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Well, and that line stuck out to me too. Again, I think later in this volumes he mentions that it's not actually that people were breaking God's laws. It's that like they thought they were breaking the law, but what was happening is they were going against the law, and then the law was breaking them. And
Mm,
he mentions that in like a
interesting.
like in a snarky way.
You want to read Zoroaster?
So this is the great founder, the faith of the Pharisees, and the fire king of Persia, who taught the doctrine of light and said the sun and flame were the most precious things in the universe, teaching that building of the fire within the soul of the individual, the fire burns in man, is the eldest of all flames, the man dependent on fire, and this fire is the divine essence of God himself, yada, 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 blah, blah. This is initiates of the flame. This is pretty much exactly where Manly P. Hall lifted that concept from, and he doesn't say Promethean or Prometheus in here, but essentially we're talking about that same concept, the Promethean fire, which it's
Mm-hmm.
like Manly P. Hall's favorite sort of trope to go back to, especially as you start going towards all the rest of his writings. Like Prometheus is that dude, Lucifer, that's the light bearer, right? That comes up very frequently in that same exact context.
Absolutely, yeah. And for those that don't know, the first episode of the Occult Book Club was on Initiates of the Flame. So check that out. We have here Daddy Plato. Plato's doctrines were based upon the principles of logic, and he taught his disciples the orderly creation, the logical creation, and the reasonable in the universe. He taught a geometrical base of all growth and instructed his followers that the universe, God, man, and nature are mathematical units capable of exact analysis. But I wonder where Plato got it from. Oh, that's right. He got it from Pythagoras. I'm surprised he didn't put Pythagoras in here, by the way. Where
Well, I've heard. I mean, I can't remember who told me this, but sometimes a lot of what Manly P. Hall writes is also what he doesn't write. So when you see that, like he's got a list, it's like the Forbes list, right? You ever heard like in the Forbes list where it's like, here's the 100 richest people in the world, and you know that there's someone that's not on that list that's
yeah.
even richer than the number one, and that's how you know that they're so rich that they don't even, they know who to pay off to not make the list of rich people. So I think there's some unwritten names in a lot of these lists that Manly P. Hall comes up with. Like you gotta know to know.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. I'm seeing it, bro. I'm seeing it. It's all right, dude. So we have your favorite, your boy here. Of course, you were gonna highlight this one.
Jesus, the
No.
one teacher. No, he mentions Hiram Abiff, which again, this is like early on into Manly P. Hall's writings and even just in his studies in general. And once he actually becomes like an honorary Freemason, he just ceases talking about Masonry at all in general. And I think a lot of his influence of Masonry comes from what he reads from Albert Pike. And that kind of stands out in a lot of different places. But here he writes, Hiram Abiff, the great Masonic idol and ideal, taught in his unspoken life the doctrine of human regeneration. And then he mentions that only transmutation lays the path of immorality or immortality, and every human quality must be transmuted into a divine and eternal thing. I mean, he's talking alchemy here, which is kind of an interesting language because he mentions that I think too in like the Buddha one, but here it's almost all kind of alchemy that he's talking about. So I'm just always intrigued by Manly Palmer Hall's combination of like Masonry and alchemy when he starts like mixing words like that, because it feels like there's something else to this description, and this is just like a very brief version of it.
So before we go any further, I want to say, bro, because I'm reading something here. The light bearers are incidents and can receive our respect and veneration, but the light is the thing which we should worship and not the one who brings it. That's really interesting because for the next Occult Book Club, I want to do the secret of the golden flower. Let me see. I'll make sure I got the name right. I'm pretty sure it's that. The secret of the golden flower. I want to do that for the next Occult Book Club. And it's all about the light. It talks a lot about bending the light and all this stuff. And here he is. This is obviously probably influenced by that. Or how you're saying this Lucifer figure, this Prometheus figure, where he gave man the forbidden thing, which was the fire. You know, the Titans were pissed off at him. But here he says to worship the light and not the one who brings it. So interesting choice of words there. But what would you expect, right?
Got to read between the lines, right?
Mm-hmm. So moving on here, we have this. These are stories. I'm not 100% on.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that for some of the stories, I'd rather do like maybe a separate episode where we just talk about the different stories that he goes through. But for pretty much all these, I just kind of skipped the fictional stories. At least my notes on them.
Fictional, right?
Okay, yeah. Because I don't know if there's a whole lot of like hardcore Manly Palmer Hall fans that are fighting in comments over like, no, this is all legitimate, this is all real.
Well, dude, I mean, I'm a big Manly P. Hall fan, but some of the stuff he does and says pisses me off too, and I've listened to hours and hours and hours of his lectures. And dude, I don't.
Not on 1X, I hope.
No what?
Not on 1X, I hope.
Sometimes you can't mess with the delivery of the message, bro. That's the thing, dude. No, for real. You can't. Sometimes if it was meant to be relayed in that format or in that certain speed, I sometimes keep it. Depends on what I'm listening to. Sometimes I'll keep it. If I'm studying a material, I won't speed it up because I need to be able to intake it. But this guy, man, I mean, we've talked about it, where he's just sitting there, he's just going on and on and on. No notes, bro. What in the world, dude? So take a look at this because I wanna read the description on the next issue, and then I want to do the one that he describes in this one because actually I have a story behind that one. But this
the plate description you're talking about.
Yeah, the plate. So just intake, you got, you can consider this mercury, right? Or
this is the microcosm and macrocosm that they're showing.
We'll get into it, but this character right here, that's like a Mercury or Hermes, right?
Sure.
Okay, whatever. Fuck you, Thomas. So description of last month's plate, I'll bring that up here in a second. But I like when he's asking for money, dude. Did you read all the parts where he's like, listen, we need your support. We can't do it without you. And here he is asking the notice of subscribers. We must therefore ask you to cooperate further with us in this matter and assist in securing a greater number that the necessary printer's bills may be paid. And we trust that the next 6 months of this magazine will meet your approval.
You know how that is, man. Begging people for money so you can print your book. I mean, that's not a lot has changed in 100 years.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just, just imagining him asking people for money. I know later on in his life it wasn't hard getting money because they were just like throwing it at him. But I think there was some shady stuff going on with him too, bro. You think Manly P. Hall was a lizard person, dude?
A lizard person. I mean, if lizard people exist, then I would say he would have to have been one of them. I'll leave it at that.
Wait, so a paranoid American doesn't believe in lizard people? Is that what you're trying to say?
Saying if I do believe in lizard people, then I would say Manly Palmer Hall was probably a lizard person.
All right. Manly P. Hall was a lizard person. So here we are, bro. You can read the first one. We have the questions and answers department.
Well, so I didn't even care about the what is a soul and does our life belong to us. I was interested in a couple of the different ones, but one of is what is free will, and I guess this is before where when Manly Palmer Hall was talking about don't believe anyone when they say that they've got the truth and they're just kind of like being vague. I mean, I guess to his credit, he's not vague here. He's like very matter of fact, but also just like the confidence that he's got as he's making these claims without, going into any detail, just like the simplistic answers, like the balls on this guy, right? But I guess at the same time, if you're writing this Zine and you're claiming to have all this like esoteric knowledge and you're breaking stuff down for people, you don't want to come across as being unsure of your own, interpretations. So there's not a lot that he writes that doesn't sound like this matter of fact answers. But so what is free will? And according to Manly P. Hall, like here's the answer. Like you don't have to worry about all of the thousands of years of philosophy or anything. Just here's the answer finally. God alone has free will. Man has the power of choice. Ignorance is the limiting factor in free will, so that the greater number of things we know, the greater our area of choice, until as gods, knowing all, we have the choice of all. So he's basically saying that if you know everything, if you're omniscient, then you just become a god. So I guess that's like once you become so enlightened that you've got every bit of information, then you technically become omnipotent as well. I guess I don't know if I believe that, but I just love how he's like, nope, pretty much like people don't have free will. God has free will. People have choices, and the amount, like what you see as free will, just depends on the options that you create for yourself.
We have are all individual experiences preserved? Answer: yes, they are.
Yep.
They are the bias of soul growth and are stored up to this in the centers of bodies until we have built the necessary faculties to read them. Interesting. So he's talking about it's like in Akashic records, right?
Yeah, and I think in some of the later ones, he starts talking about like they're stored in the atoms and they're stored in the matter, and some like he gets even more specific about it. But I almost want to just stop this one of like, are all individual experiences preserved? Yes. Move on. Like he just gave me the answer, Next. I kind of love that matter of fact way that he answers these.
I wonder who's actually writing and asking these questions. We have the next one here. Let's see here.
Well, so the one that I wrote down was, should we use our astrology colors? And I think that's like the real question there is like, should I live my life by, like horoscopes and stuff? And he says we should use everything we can, but not spend too much time harmonizing vibrations. If we do, we'll have no time left for work, and labor produces much better growth than color harmony. Never use any such means, however, as astrology, talisman magic, etc., to gain over other people in financial, spiritual, or material matters. To do so is black magic. So
but you see what he says there, right? To gain over other people. So as long as you don't do it to gain over other people, you're in the clear type of thing. Right?
I just love that you can read here that he's like this capitalist new agey guy. So like he believes in horoscopes and he believes in what he says is harmonizing your vibrations, but also like he's a capitalist at heart.
100%. I mean,
like, he wants you to go to work and, God helps those who help themselves. He repeats that very often over and over.
It's like Kim Kardashian. It's like, women are asking me what they need to do, whatever it was, that whole thing for a long time. She's like, get your ass up and get to work or something like that. It's like and people are
That's
curious.
Daddy Hall, bro. Daddy Hall, he gets his ass up and then he sits it back down and he reads a book for freaking 12 hours and then he lectures you on you should work hard.
Because at this time he was about to be supported by the sugar mamas, bro. I think he already was.
He was here yet. What was he here yet? I don't think he was here yet.
Was he? Oh, we'll look it up. Anyways, read the next one. I'll look it up.
So please explain the crucifixion. And he doesn't actually explain the crucifixion. He just focuses on the word. And he says, the word crucifixion means a crossing. The crossing of spiritual and material currents forms bodies, and these bodies crucify and seek to destroy the life which is within or hanging upon them. And he also mentions, not in this one, but later on, that that his interpretation of a cross or a crucifix is the meeting of 4 infinite triangles, which I thought was kind of a cool way to put it.
Here we go, bro. During the early 20s, Caroline Lloyd and her daughter Estelle, members of a family who controlled an oil field in Ventura County, California, began sending sizable portion of their oil income to Hall. With these donated funds, Hall traveled within Europe and Asia to study the lives, customs, religions of the people there. And
that's the next issue, bro. We're gonna see the very real effects of the sugar mama's money just starts rolling in.
So Hall
he hits the world, and he's like goes on a worldwide vacation.
While visiting London, England in the early 1930s, Hall acquired a substantial collection of rare books and manuscripts about alchemy and esotericism from an auction agent at Sotheby's. Owing to economic conditions resulting from the Great Depression, he acquired the collection for a price much lower than normal. Caroline Lloyd died in 1946, and in her will left Hall a house, $15,000 cash, which I'm going to look up to see how much that was, and an annual percentage of her family's oil field shares. Damn, dude. Valued at approximately $10,000 per year for the next 38 years.
Yeah, so he never had to work for those next 38 years. And this is not including the income that he actually gets from going on the road and talking and publishing books. And
dude,
everything. This is just to keep him paid and fat.
This is wild. $15,000 in 1946 was the equivalent to $228,313 with 85 cents.
I mean, if someone wanted to drop that on me, I could just focus on comics for nothing but comics.
Nobody's dropping that on you, Thomas.
Oh.
Nobody's doing that, dude.
Hit me up, patreon.com/paranoidamerican.
Wow, dude, this dude was an instant. Almost, he was a thousandaire almost instantly. Before he was even 30 years old. So I can see how he was able to do all this. Because I've always wondered, bro, how some people go so hard in the paint, but you got people who don't have podcasts who can just focus on one topic at a time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they don't have that brutal back-breaking podcast work to take up all of their time.
No, it's not that. It's that I have something that I call occult ADHD, where ADD or something, where I can't focus on one topic at a time for a very long time because I want to start. I'll be researching 3 or 4 topics at a time, and you know this, dude. How many days, how many weeks have we been at it about recording the next Occult Book Club, and I haven't been able to because I've been reading other things, and haven't been reading what I need to be reading. So. You're a witness, dude.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, that's
Juan
right.
is the reason for the slow trickling.
But it's not like we don't podcast together. You know what I mean? Like we still do podcasts.
That's right. Well, if it's on Tartaria or werewolves, we're down.
Or Jeffrey Dahmer.
This was the next one to synthetic sympathy, and this, I think, is a good example of what I was just talking about, where you've got this mix of like new ageism, but also a combination of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, like something like your dad would tell you when you haven't had a job for like 2 weeks and he wants you to start putting applications back in. Like he kind of rubs off in that same way. And this article, he talks, and this is a little bit controversial. Like I'm not sure how much I agree with the exact things that he says here, but basically he's saying that there's three main emotions in human emotions have this like range of three main things that he breaks it down into: mercy, compassion, sympathy. And he says that mercy's good, compassion's good, but that sympathy is like the horrible one, and the sympathy is like an enemy. So essentially, he says mercy is the transmutation of selfishness, arrogance, and the ever-present instinct in the human soul which condemns unheard. So mercy is basically humility and, you know, putting yourself not first and, you know, kind of considering others. That's sort of the mercy aspect. Compassion is the transmutation of passion, in which the fire of lust and greed is transmuted into deep understanding, a deep calling from the soul, a great love born for the lesser love, blah, 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 blah. This is like not just sympathizing with someone, but having compassion for them. And then he talks about sympathy. And this is where he kind of gets into the paint. And he says, the third is sympathy, which in itself a betrayer of mercy and compassion. And there's nothing more at fault in all the universe than sympathy. Which is like that that line right there, taken out of context, sounds so extreme to me, right? There's nothing more at fault in all of the universe than sympathy. Sympathy is the lullaby of endeavor. It's the death rattle of opportunity, and those who use it as a power play havoc with the plan. Where others sympathize with us, we continue in our errors, fostering them instead of destroying them, nursing them instead of removing them. This is that like, stop babying the child, you know, dear.
Because I'm
like,
maintained for the rest of my
yeah.
life.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of rich when you realize that like the very next step, like as he was writing this, he was just getting this check for 200K cut to him.
And 10,000 a year, which is probably an equivalent to for 38 years, 10,000 a year was $152,000 a year, dude. The equivalent to that. So
not nothing.
Not nothing. Yeah, this dude was set, bro. I mean, he became one of the greatest occult.
He makes good points, though. He makes good points.
Sure.
And I think I do think hypocrites can make good points. Like, you can still learn something from a hypocrite saying things that are true wisdom just because they themselves. It would just be like if like an idiot heard, you know, like the formula to some math equation and could recite it enough to, you know, transfer it from one non-idiot to another non-idiot. It doesn't mean that the idiot is now smart because they were able to transfer some kind of arcane and complicated knowledge, but, you know, they were involved in that process.
Yeah, go ahead with the next one.
So he says, man must be inspired in his efforts instead of being sympathized with in his ailments. The philosopher of old never sympathized with a crying child, but sought to teach him the lesson of his fall. I like that one. I mean, that one, it makes sense. Again, it's just like tough love is kind of what he's describing here, and how, you know, he's opposed to sympathy in general, which I like the concept of like angry Daddy Hall. And then he does this a lot. This is one of my favorite things that we're gonna see him do constantly, where he's like, "There's two kinds of people in this world," and I always read it like it's like an angry radio
like
host.
Scolding you.
And the name of this guy is probably before your time. There's a guy named Mickey Rooney who used to come on like one of the news channels, and he was just always ranting about things that sounded like they could have been jokes, and maybe they were, but he legitimately got angry about it. Like, you know, why do they call them parkways and driveways when you know, drive in a parkway and you park in a driveway? But like, he would legitimately sound like he was getting angry about it. And it's like the Peter Griffith, you know, what really grinds my gears. I think it was kind of like the OG version of that. But anyways, Manly V. Hall makes these claims constantly where he's just like putting people in the buckets. And he says, there's two kinds of people in the world. One is the kind that are always bewailing, and the other group is the one that's eternally trying to find a real reason for the ever-changing conditions of life. So like the way he's describing it, it's just like, you're either just like a big baby just crying all the time and whining, or you're like getting down to business and you're figuring out the truth of all life. Which I don't know. I don't know if I fit everyone that I know into those two buckets exclusively.
Get yourself a sugar mama.
I love how he does it, man. I mean, he states it so matter of factly. There's two kinds of people in this world. So yeah, I'm gonna highlight every time I see he says that. I'm gonna highlight those, and we'll cover them.
And I like this part here. When a great prince of Egypt died, they hired mourners to weep at the tombs, and great processions of white-clad figures howled and wailed behind the funeral cortege. Is that how you say that? Cortege for so many pieces of silver a day. So it's like, are these crisis actors, bro? Are these the OG crisis actors? Where when the Egyptian prince died, they would come out. The richer the family of the departed, the more weepers were hired, so that when a great dignitary died in the streets, it literally ran with tears, which were paid for at so much per. What the fuck?
Yeah, and if you could, he makes a point here, sort of between the lines too, but you could technically raise your kids to just know how to cry better than other kids, and now they'd kind of be like a shoe-in. Like your entire profession, your career for life could just be you cry for people. And I don't know how common that is.
Fucking bootlicker, dude.
Well, I don't know if it's common in your religion, but I know that when most of my family members end up dying and going through like the Catholic Church system on the way out, there's always like a little line item that you can check to pay a little bit extra, and they'll legitimately send like 4 or 6 or 8 criers to go and just kind of like cry a little bit louder to like puff up the numbers in the pews.
Really?
You ever heard about that? Yeah,
no.
it's still to this day. It's still a very I don't say very common, but I mean it's common enough of a practice that it's not like this ancient thing that gets rolled out only when the most esoteric old person in your family dies. It's kind of a typical thing, usually for people that don't have larger families, to kind of like puff out the numbers.
Yeah, I did not know that, bro. That's news to me. You want to go with the next one here?
Yep, 7 natural laws. So, and again, like I don't know if these are his 7 natural laws, or if these are 7 natural laws that he's amalgamated from other sources. It's not always 100% clear, but he says that. And I actually, the part that you've got highlighted at the bottom, I'm going to read that part first before we even go over them. It says, these are the 7 laws in which occult students must deal in their daily life, and with which they must learn to familiarize themselves with, that they may adjust their lives to the concepts in harmony with them. And only a man or woman who is at peace is the one who is harmonious with the plan of his being. So if you want to be harmonious, and if you want to know the truth, right, the abstract truth that like he's kind of getting here, you have to know these 7 laws and essentially abide by them. Which I don't know if I like all 7 of these laws, but that just might be me not liking rules in general. So he says, the law of evolution. Everything in the universe is at some stage of an endless path leading from absolute nothingness to perfect omnipotence. And everything in the universe is greater today than yesterday and will be greater still tomorrow, which is almost exactly the opposite in what he was chastising people for in the abstractions. Because he literally says in the abstractions, one of those examples is people that are like, oh, don't worry, things get better every day. And here he is in the very next issue talking about
gonna
the
be
law
better.
of evolution. And I guess just at a premise, I'm not sure if I believe in this general concept that everything is constantly on their way to getting better. Like there's such thing as de-evolution, right? Things like the fall of Rome. Like sometimes things are getting better. The Tower of Babel. Sometimes things get kind of good and then they crash down and they get bad. So it's not just like everything's constantly getting bigger. But it depends on how far you want to zoom in or how far you want to zoom out on if it looks like it's an absolute disaster or if things just look normal.
I agree. I agree with you on that, because we can't just assume that, right, things are gonna follow a regimen, right? Because they tell us it is, like the whole Darwinism and all that stuff. We know that that's a psyop because the guys behind that, right? I mean, you're doing research on it. You know what I'm talking about.
We're not allowed to talk about that anymore.
Yeah, we're not allowed to talk about it, but it's true.
So he goes on and he talks about the law of compensation or karma. As you sow, so shall you reap. Every cause you start in motion, every thought, every action, good or bad, has an unavoidable result and reaction. To me, this is a little bit abstract. Like, all right, every action has a reaction, but like, what does that mean exactly? Like, are you talking about if I said a mean thing that now I'm gonna go to hell, or I'm gonna get reincarnated as a cricket, or like, what exactly is that, reaction? And the way that he says it here, it's almost like, well, he knows, and you should know, but I don't know. I sometimes I get that feel, so I'm gonna call
Yeah.
him out, calling out Daddy Hall. Some of these.
Very matter of fact, right? The law of polarity, everything in the universe expresses itself through two poles, positive and negative. The law of polarity.
Everyone fits into these two groups.
The law of polarity teaches that the work of man is to establish himself at a neutral point exactly between the two poles, which position is the place of balance, hence omnipotence. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So this one's I agree with this. And
Makes sense, right?
It makes sense. It seems very obvious, but remember back when he was talking about free will and that
Only God has it.
like only God has it, but that humans, it all depends on like what your spectrum of options are, right? But this again, like this law of polarity, it's almost like, does that mean if I'm a good person, right? Like I know what good and evil is, and I kind of like, meter myself between the two. But if I all of a sudden learn about something like, Dahmer, like all of a sudden now I know what Jeffrey Dahmer is and like Dahmer's whole backstory. Does my middle point like shift a little bit more evil now because
I get you.
of the law of polarity?
Yeah.
So, and I might be taking that too literal, but again, it's like if you start learning about, staring into the abyss constantly,
your horizons start to widen and widen and widen, and then those poles start to shift. Yeah.
Well, and also what you considered like, normal vanilla middle of the lane might all of a sudden like you come out of your hermit hole after like 3 years of like the most extremist research, and what you consider normal is like so far beyond what anyone else would consider it. So,
and we know that
relative.
Information changes people too, right? So how you're saying, the more you learn, the more that could be adjusted, and your ideologies. Because look at all these guys, right? We talked about Kaczynski on the last episode we recorded, and how you said he wasn't always all crazy. That came after the fact, after they probably did some MK Ultra stuff on him. So who knows? Absolutely.
So they got the law of periodicity.
Periodicity?
The law of periodicity demands that after every expenditure of energy, there must be a time of repose for the restoration of lost power. We see it in periods of sleeping, waking, winter and summer, life and death. So this is Daddy Hall saying that naps are in accordance with, God's law, and that if you do want to seek enlightenment, naps are.
Is that why you nap?
In line with this. I really don't nap, man. I wish I did, but I don't.
I nap sometimes. Not once you have kids, you can't really nap because.
But see, you can drop that. I'm not taking a nap. I'm just adhering to the law of periodicity.
No, I'm resting my. I always say I'm resting my eyes. My wife gets mad because
I'm like, "No, bro. I am going through a time of repose to restore my lost power,
recharging one's chi, and you fucking just sit there." Like, motherfucker. Yeah, I did that the other day. She's like, "What are you doing? You're not going to sleep, are you?" I'm like, No. I'm just resting my eyes." And then
power nap.
Bro, I was like this. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I start snoring, bro, as soon as I close my eyes. So we have.
There's all those like sleeping patterns, right? Like Da Vinci and like a whole number of them where they split their sleeping up into 12 different sections, and some of them was as little as just like a 5-minute or like a 10-minute power nap. And they would never sleep for more than like 10 to 15 minutes at a time ever. You
have Descartes, you have John Dee, which apparently only like slept 2 hours a day or something like that. Freaking weirdo.
So then we got the law of alternation. Everything alternates between its poles. In successive births, man alternates in his forms from positive to negative. For the laws of nature demand that we receive the benefit by the experience of both the positive and negative paths. And then it says, every 7th swing in human evolution, we have a perfect type of a male or female form, for these are the two extremes of the pendulum. And as soon as I read that, my first thought was, what swing am I on now? Like, I don't feel like I'm on swing 7. But
look at this specimen of a man.
Like,
You
was
know?
swing 7 the last one, and now I'm or is like, am I in swing 6, and the next
Nah,
one's like the
dude.
best it's gonna get,
You're
or
like
like what?
swing 2 at
Okay,
least.
I'm glad to hear that. That leaves plenty of room for improvement between now and number 7.
And Puerto
So
Ricans are
what?
swing 1, 100%.
Well, so you think what swing are you on personally right now? You on swing 1?
I think, yeah, dude, we're too lazy to be any other swing. We're like we're like kicking it off, like right, like we're the first initial like push. You know what I mean? So hey, maybe this is what Hitler and all those guys were trying to do, right? They were trying to push for that 7th swing. In I told you, bro, the Darwinism stuff is a psyop, dude.
Well, and I wonder, I mean, could you apply some kind of like Tesla electricity magic here, where you're not just limited to the swing of the pendulum, but every time it swings back, you use that like law of reverberation or whatever it is, like, so that like you're kind of building that momentum.
Well, no,
each
no, no.
time.
I'm going to stop you there because the reason why I want to do the secret of the golden flower is because it talks about how exactly what you just said. I read today where motion from momentum is unpredictable. Let me see if I can find it here. I'm going to look it up because it said something just about that momentum too. That momentum was not good.
Well, it's like the video of like the dudes jumping on the trampoline, and like every time they jump, all their friends
Here we
jump,
go.
and then like by the time they get to the 10th one, they're like 30 feet up in the air.
Action caused by momentum is random action, not essential action. And that stood out to me because what you're saying, dude. Therefore, it is said that action influenced by things is human desire, while action influenced by
That
things.
sounds like something you'd read it on someone's like bathroom when you walked in, like above the hand towels.
What that action caused by momentum is random action?
Yeah, yeah.
Not essential action. The new line of a bath decorations by Paranoid American. So, dude, that I think that'd be a good market, right? Like make cryptid inspired or conspiracy inspired like bathroom decorations for people.
They do have like cryptid soap, so maybe I do need to move into that space, like some JFK,
Yeah.
like assassination soap,
Yeah.
some MK Ultra, bath salts.
I think that would, yeah. I think that would be a good idea. Actually, I like that idea.
All
So
right, let's keep talking after this.
where are we at here?
So we're on the law of harmony and rhythm, and that nature's divine plan is harmony, and that inharmony is the friction caused by bodies out of place. Which I like that visual. If you imagine like one of those like weird art sculptures where it's like two combs that are like grazing back and forth, and they all just have to like be perfectly aligned. And if just one little thing gets out of line, the combs like scrape each other and it makes a big noise, and maybe there'll be like sparks, but essentially you're talking about friction because something's just not how it was designed to be. That said, one of my favorite, this is something that my dad always used to say, like whenever you bring up like, oh, the harmony of nature, and you'd be like, fucking nature didn't invent central AC. And nature, harmony of nature is like like the cat that just went out there and just tore up a nest of 6 baby bunnies, not because it was hungry or because it was in
Because it was an
accordance with the
asshole.
harmony of nature. Yeah, it was just, it wanted to have fun, and it decided that like, I just want to taste blood for 30 seconds and have fun with it, and
Yeah.
then move on to the next thing. Like the harmony of nature is like a cat destroying a bunch of baby bunnies for fun. That's kind of that like, always keep that in mind when people bring up harmony in nature.
That actually happened when I was a kid too. I had some bunnies in Puerto Rico, and my grandma put them in the garage. I remember, but the garage it wasn't like a garage door. It was just like this gate, right? There's like this gate where it's got the bars on it, and a cat got in it and tore the rabbit's head off, and just like that. And there was like blood everywhere. I remember that. It was blood everywhere. And how you're saying exactly that, it was just being an asshole. There was no reason for why that cat needed to do that, but it did. So we have, and this is here.
Cats are a good example too. When people bring up like, oh, humans are the only species that like hurts each other.
Like,
Like,
nope.
nah, bro. Like, cats will just hurt other animals for fun because it's fun to them.
Do you have cats?
There's plenty of other species. I not right now, but I have had cats and I've seen the different personalities. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's another matter of fact haul. The law of reincarnation. This is the hardest doctrine for most people to accept. But everywhere in nature, we see the necessity of it. It is the only law we can find which explains the inequalities of temperament and the degrees of intelligence which we find in the world, and at the same time retain a just theology. Either this law must be an actual fact, or else the divine plan lacks the principles of justice, and human equalities and suffering must have other cause than the whims of deity. This law is taught in 3/4 of the world religions.
This was my favorite one too that he mentions here, because specifically this part where he says either this law must be an actual fact or else the divine plan lacks the principle of justice. It's almost like I hope God's listening to me right now, and it's like, bro, there better be some like bigger plan behind all this, because otherwise this is really messed up.
Because I'll be damned.
Yeah.
I'll be damned if this isn't part of the plan. All right. Yeah, it's like I used. Yeah, and then
and the way that he says too, though, where he says that it's the only law which we can find which explains the inequalities, and at the same time retain a just theology. So I mean, it's kind of like saying like we found it. This is the only answer, because anything else just wouldn't make sense based on these two premises here.
And did you catch this? The fake newspaper.
Well, I don't know if you noticed that's in every single issue.
Yeah.
There's a Pearly Gates Gazette. Yeah.
So I want to go up here real quick to the explanation of the plate, where this name stood out, right? Henry Kunrath, which is one of the greatest alchemists ever, and this is actually volume 1, number 6, where because they let you contemplate on it. But here's this painting, this alchemical plate, and the story behind this is he was one of the great medieval alchemists and Kabbalists and supposed a member of ancient Rosicrucian Brotherhood. And apparently the figure represents Hercules, androgynous man Christ, strangling the serpent of evil and exalting the serpent of wisdom. So we have the little baby Hercules there, right? He's got like 2 faces. It says homo. It says homo on the top there. But
that's blasphemous, bro.
This Henry Kunrath, I had an interview lined up with this guy from this bookstore down south by Fort Lauderdale. And I showed you the book. It was like $20-something thousand, and it was a copy of the Amphitheater of Eternal Wisdom by Kunrath, and I was gonna go and interview him, and we were gonna flip through the alchemical plates and all this stuff. And before, like literally the morning that I was about to go down, I texted him before I was gonna go down. He fucking ghosted me, bro. I was super excited. I was like, dude, we're gonna freaking.
He got that call. He got that call, or he got that letter that was delivered without the stamp on it. You know what I mean?
The letter that was what?
It got delivered without a stamp on it. Like it was hand delivered and dropped off with the little wax seal.
Yeah, he said don't trust this guy. He believes in lizard people. So at the top of the drawing is represented the divine name Jehovah, the male and female third aspect of the logos, and the god of material growth. From him pour out the archetypes of 10 Sephira, the original 10 signs of the zodiac and powers of cosmic impetus. All things first exist in archetype or cosmic plan before they are concreted in matter. And I've been wanting to do this for this show specifically, breaking down alchemical plates. But the problem with these, dude, is that some of these are so wild that you don't even know what's going on. And again, here we have Manly P. Hall breaking this down like it's nothing. Like it's just another day in the office, dude.
Well, and just take an index of how many different languages you're going to need to know just to decipher this one piece of paper.
So there's Hebrew in here, there's Latin, there's
some Pig Latin in there too.
There's something, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. And here this guy is, the little figure in the center has 2 heads. Like the one in last month's plate. These two represent the bride and the groom in the spiritual marriage and the completion of the eternal romance in the soul of man. The male head represents the spirit, the female head the soul. In other words, the sun and moon, or the blood of red lion and the gluten of the white eagle. So we have the red lion there that eats the alchemical sun. The ancients said that their immortal stone was made of moonstone and gold in certain proportions. I've always said this, the moonstone, the whole transmutation, it was actually because of a meteorite. So, and gold in certain proportions, absorbed by the universal vinegar of prepared mercury. This alchemical process of transmuting the base qualities and perversions of powers into spiritual attributes, accomplishments, and qualities is the key to the sacred wisdom of the ancients. So again, he goes on, but I wanted to bring it up because it was Henry Kunrath, and that one guy freaking flaked on me. So if you're listening to this, I forgot his name. You're an asshole, bro.
I was gonna say too, if Manly Palmer Hall ends up breaking down one of your plates in his magazine, that's like almost the equivalent of like getting on the Rogan show, right?
I mean, except that all those guys are dead. But kind of, sort of, yeah.
Not dead, reincarnated, right?
Reincarnated. So here we are, dude. Finally made it.
Well, and I was gonna say, if you look at this one, first of all, how adorable is it that they've got like the little occult, astrological symbols, like woven into the Christmas decorations, and then if you
I think this is alchemical symbols, bro. Right.
And if you look at, well, I mean, you know, it's kind of like potato, no?
Okay.
And then at the bottom it says Christmas number 1923.
Christmas number.
Because this is like the 1923rd Christmas, essentially.
Oh, I just got that and did not catch that. Good catch, bro. Yeah, because it is, right? Because it was AD.
Well, you're making the joke before, like, what's BC?
Yeah, exactly, and I couldn't even get that. So I'm an idiot. You want to read this part? Because this is the part that stood out to me.
So he's got a special note, and if you look at that, like the third sentence down, it says he's talking about he's gonna go onto this like big trip, and he's gonna cover the entire trip will cover 38,000 miles of land and sea, and from it I shall gain the material to complete work on 2 large books of symbolism, which I am now preparing, and also for an occult encyclopedia, which is to follow shortly. I shall be in constant touch with the headquarters of my work, and the magazines and publications will appear just as I were at home all the time. So clearly some other people are going to take up the reins in his the following issues, but he doesn't necessarily give everyone credit for exactly what they contribute, so it still seems like it's all him. But when he talks here about the 2 large books, and specifically the occult encyclopedia, which is to follow shortly, like this is him planning out the secret teachings of all ages, which is kind of cool to read, as like this is the before secret teachings.
Yeah, I found that really, really fascinating too, that he literally is talking about, and also for an occult encyclopedia, because people ask me all the time, oh, what should I read in order to get into all this occult stuff? And I always point them out to, you ever heard of Manly P. Hall and the Secret Teaching of All Ages? Well, there you go.
Start with honestly, that. Man, encyclopedia is the best way to look at it too, because it's, if someone wants to, find out about World War I or something, and you tell them go look it up in the encyclopedia, you're just gonna get like the most general, simple version, but it'll be more or less, kind of like a summary of it. And again, that's kind of what Secret Teachings is. He doesn't go into any one topic in so much depth that like all of the light is, like he's completely unveiled this topic and he's deculted it entirely. It doesn't ever happen. It's really just this huge collection of a whole bunch of little things. And if that book in particular doesn't pique your interest, then there's not a lot out there that will. But if it does, then it's kind of like the starting point, that's your gateway drug into grimoires and alchemy and all sorts of weird sort of like Neoplatonic philosophy and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, because he literally he talks about where he went or where he's gonna go all throughout the world. And how you're saying, if that broader umbrella term doesn't pique your interest, anything under that is just esoteric, esoteric. So you need to find that one topic and focus in on that, because it still falls under that big umbrella term. You get what I'm saying? Like grimoires. Well, there's this type of grimoire. There's this type, or magic. There's talismanic magic. There's grimoire magic.
Alchemy or
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it's like you dip your toes in with that, and if that doesn't pique your interest, then just give up, dude, because it doesn't get any better from there. You know what I mean? You want to read this next part? I mean, it's kind of close to Christmas, right?
Yeah, no, it's close enough to Christmas, and also I thought it was interesting. Not only that he had like the Christmas design and everything, but he goes all in on how awesome Christmas is, I think, in some ways. But he also breaks something out, which I wanna just kind of like, we'll just kind of shoot this shit a little bit about. But he opens up and says, the bustle and confusion of our ever more self-centered, and again, 1923 that he's writing this, right? So it's like almost exactly 100 years ago, off by 1 year.
And I want to add before you go, Thomas, remember that he was put in charge of a church all by himself when he was like 21 years old. So he was, again, super religious before all the Freemasonic and all this other stuff. And right there, I believe that when he's talking at the beginning here, when he's about to be, literally, he says he's going to go around from time to time. There will be at Kyoto are the great Buddhist universities, the greatest and most advanced Japanese institutions. At Peking, we find the remnants of the ancient. So he's literally talking about how
this is when that $200,000 check hit the bank. He's like, "Yo, we're going everywhere."
I think that he's hinting that he's going to be initiated to all these secret mystery schools. So we literally have him there saying like, "Hey, I'm going to go here, 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 here. I'm going to be initiated into all these schools of thought." And I think from there, it's going to be interesting to see what, as we go through all the volumes, his evolution of ideas, because we're definitely going to see that.
Well, and it's kind of cool you brought that up, because like right before this, he's talking about, I'm about to go get initiated all across the world. I'm going to learn about every, secret initiation and everything that I can learn. And then he goes right into the spirit of Christmas and directly starts talking about how Santa Claus goes out to the northern, to the ends of the earth, the north and the southern poles. And he gets gifts, and he takes those gifts and he just drops them on you. Kind of what like Manly P. Hall, I think, sees himself as like this esoteric Santa Claus. It's like, yeah, bro, like Manly Palmer Hall is this esoteric Santa that's going and just dropping these jewels and these gifts down your chimneys for you to wake up in the middle of the night and go and find them in the mornings. And he almost says that word for word in some of this. So again, 1923, 100 years ago, and he's saying, our self-centered lives are slowly killing out the beautiful spirit of Christmas. We see people fussing and stewing, sinking back into their chairs at home after a raid on the bargain counter at the 11th hour, with their hat over one eye and their corn singing in 9 languages and 3 colors. Few people in all the world who have really preserved the true spirit of Christmas, and most of these are children who have not yet been caught up in the maelstrom of our commercial ethics. The spice of Christmas is indeed losing its savor, and with its going will vanish one of man's greatest opportunities, which, like all that have gone before, he has abused and neglected. And this is kind of the esoteric version of, like your grandma or your aunt that's like complaining about, oh, no one, the war on Christmas, and no one ever celebrates Christmas anymore, and it's all happy holidays and yada yada.
Dude,
but there's some truth to that, and he's getting down to some of that.
100 years ago, he's talking about Black Friday, bro. After a raid upon the bargain counter at the 11th hour, with their hats over one eye and their corn singing, he's talking about Black Friday there, dude. He's talking about how people are getting their bargains, and how they're just stumbling over, fussing and stuff. This is like the OG recording with an iPhone back then. How we're talking about all this world's going to shit. They were saying that 100 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, few people in the world who have really preserved the true spirit of Christmas.
Well, he just has no idea how far we've evolved since then.
Yeah. So I'm just saying they were saying the same shit 100 years ago.
so this is the part that I latched onto and I want to riff on for a little bit. But he also says, And anyone that's got children in the room, hide the little ears. There is a terrible feeling that comes into the heart of a little child when a thoughtless parent or a heartless playmate whispers to it that there is no Santa Claus. That's one of the heartbreaks of childhood, when they dream of the little old man and his rosy cheeks and twinkling eyes and his long white whiskers and his snug red suit is dispelled in the mind of a child. And from that time on, all the world seems false. The parents seldom realize enough of the plan of being to understand that they've destroyed a reality and not an illusion, and they've supplanted that reality with a false.
Oof.
And I've heard so many people say this. Sometimes it's in jest, but I think there's enough truth to it. But like, what was the very first thing that got you into conspiracy theories? And I think Shane, Tron, he said this one, and I've heard other people say it, but like, when you find out Santa's not real, like that's the ultimate, the ultimate initiation in the conspiracy theories, where you're like, wait a minute, I think that like mom and dad might be like in on this together. Like they're actually lying, and when we're asleep, they're doing all these covert actions and then pretending they didn't do it in the morning and blaming it. Like that's a false flag. That's a conspiracy. Like that's every major conspiracy kind of bundled up into one. And it's almost this initiation ritual that a lot of, at least kids in Western world kind of go through. And either you just naturally, I guess, get to, like what they say, get too old for it. And like you just kind of grow out of it, or like Manly P. Hall's saying here, it kind of gets spoiled, and it might be spoiled by a parent, or it might be spoiled by a playmate, but whatever that is, again, you're a child, right? So like you don't even know what the world is or what reality is. The only reality you know is the reality that adults tell you about. And then to find out that adults have been lying to you about probably the highlight of every year, right? Like Santa's coming, Santa's bringing presents, like the whole entire premise of Christmas is you teach the kids, and then for Santa to go away, it almost destroys Christmas in a way. And I think that's what he's getting to. But anyways, I kind of relate to that in a little way too, of that, you find out Santa's not real. It's like, wait, who, like, you guys have been lying about this? And then it's a longer, deeper conversation that kind of, it's like a milestone in childhood, right? Kind of coming to age.
To be 100%, bro, I don't remember. I know that there was, at least in my family, they never came out and were like, hey, this is bullshit. We've been playing, the Tooth Fairy's not real. It was a kind of a thing where like one year I was helping with the presents, and it was, I think like
and then you had to write Santa on one of them, right? And you were like, wait a minute, if I'm Santa,
it was like a mutual agreement. Like, hey, I'm not asking questions, but I'm seeing what's happening. When you had the gossip in the family, and it's like they never told you, but then when you were filled in on it, you go, wow, that makes a lot of sense of like X, Y, Z. You know what I'm saying? Like, you ever had that before, where it's like that one family secret that they never told you, but once you're old enough, it starts to connect a lot of dots of why things were where they were.
How come grandma's never around? Like, oh, she's a raging racist. Like, that's why she's never at any of the holiday gatherings.
So for me, it was more of like, I see what's going on. I'm helping with the present, so I just kind of insinuates already that that it's not real. That's just the way I took it.
So what age was that? Do you remember? Say like 17.
No. No. Why did you learn that Santa Claus was not real at 17?
No. Yeah, it was a very long. I had just gotten off the nipple a year before.
No, I want to say, dude, it was probably, I don't know. Is 8 years old, 7 years old too old?
Okay. I think it was around there. It was around like second grade, first or second grade, I think.
Yeah.
And like first you start hearing the other kids that are like, my
those
older
assholes
brother says that only babies believe in Santa, blah blah blah. But but again, like even then, usually the parents are like, well, if your friend Johnny at school doesn't believe in Santa, then Santa just doesn't go to his house, and you can tell that if you believe in Santa, then Santa, like, there's this,
And Johnny's a
like,
little asshole too, by the way.
Johnny's an asshole too.
He's a little prick is what he is.
But there's a dance, right? There's a dance because as the kid starts to get old enough to either know better or hear it from someone else, then like the parents either decide, no, we're going to push this a little bit longer because we want to, keep the Santa thing going for another year or two. But again, like that could, like, if the kid finds out, like catches you in the act, right? I saw mommy kissing Santa Claus style. Like that could literally be one of those traumatic events. Like that's kid's first JFK assassination. That's the first big thing where they're like, everything I know is a lie. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
especially with kids.
Out of the Matrix.
Yeah, especially with kids, because I believe that they're more attuned to these. Well, but then that would go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, where it is all bullshit. Then, right? Because I believe little kids create their own realities, and they're just creating a reality that they want to live in. But then when it's shattered, it's just bullshit.
Well, no, I mean, so he actually says it in here. He says that, few people in all the world have really preserved the true spirit of Christmas, and most of these are children who have not yet caught up in the maelstrom of our commercial ethics. So, like, as the kid understands about Santa, even though that's all based on a lie, like that whole premise is kind of a lie, like the feeling and that altruism. And I mean, obviously for a lot of kids, it's just like they're not in school and they get presents. So let's not discount sort of the superficial aspect of that. But there's also that aspect of Christmas, of like all of the cheesy, sort of tropes from the holiday movies that you see. But those are the things that I think the kids kind of latch onto that get lost by the adults as they go to work and they go to the Black Friday bargain bin sales and like all of the commercial hustle and bustle that he's complaining about. But like the it's almost at risk, because if the ultimate bearers of this ancient tradition are the children, right? They're the ones that haven't yet perverted it, but the children are also at risk of losing touch with this reality if they find out like the Santa Claus thing is a big lie. It's almost like the most, the vessels that can like maintain this culture the longest and represent it the best are the ones most endangered of forever being kind of like scarred by it.
And he also says here, the occultist must seek to build again in his own life the spirit of Christmas. So Thomas, you got to make sure you build the spirit of Christmas in your life. Beautiful. I mean, in its simplicity.
Does this mean that Daddy Hall would be disappointed if you did not have Christmas decorations out? Like if you didn't put your lights up in time, do you think he'd show up to your house and give that like that?
Bro, I was going to have those people on that study with him, but I guess my podcast isn't up to par to their standards, so they never hit me.
There. We'll get you there.
Never hit me back up, but I mean, I'll hit her back up one more time, maybe, but probably not. So yeah, I think that he would be disappointed, but I would love to see what he was like. You know what I mean? Like, imagine meeting. Do you think he was a practicing occultist, or you think he was just a researcher?
I think probably more researcher, but also, man,
he lived a long time.
All that time he had to put into those sugar moms to keep those checks coming. I don't know how much time you've got to be a practicing occultist. He was,
bro.
He was head deep in something. It might not have always been the books.
He was dropping dick, bro. He was 100%. And then
really? I think he was one of those attentive lovers that just kind of like always had his mouth full.
You think so? I think that one of them wasn't one a lesbian, right? One was a lesbian that wanted to like marry him, and he said no. Dude, I could start an entire podcast on all the tabs I have open, because this is wild, dude. Like all the stuff that I have open, I could just go one by one.
The ADHD podcast.
Yeah. So this other heading really stood out to me because it's something that I've always thought about since I was a kid. With growing up in church and stuff like that. It's like, for many years, one great question has been up uppermost in minds of religious people. Is the day appointed in the Bible of the ancients for the second coming of Christ? I remember, bro, since I've been 7 or 8 years old, God has been coming. I'm 28 now. It's been 20 years. He hasn't come yet. But
he went out to get a pack of smokes and he hasn't come back yet.
I think he's gonna come eventually one day. But yeah, it stood out to me. You want to read this next one?
Well, I want to kind of summarize it. Yeah, I guess I'll read this little part where he says, "There's no doubt that the creedal theologies prohibit the coming of a world teacher, for they divide against each other and tear down their brother's ideals, and would fill his coming with wranglings and dissensions, which would defile his very presence when he came." And then he talks about Europe in turmoil, which again is interesting because this is like pre-World War II, but he kind of he keeps hinting at something big happening in Europe. But he makes a claim here that I think is interesting, where it's basically saying that like the second coming's not going to happen until everyone is ready for it. But again, maybe this is me reading between the lines, but Manly Palmer Hall seems to talk more about like the Christ consciousness aspect. So it's almost like the second coming of Christ is really just when a majority of the earth has Christ consciousness, because that would be the only acceptable conditions for him to consider the second coming to actually happen. So it would almost be like the actual second coming of Christ would be less of a miracle than a majority of the population having Christ consciousness.
Yeah, and I see what you mean. But yeah, again, he's on the theosophy kick where Jesus was just another ascended master, and he was just another adept. And that's why if you've noticed, when he references God, he calls him deity or deities, because I think that he believed that there was more than one. And I think we'll get into it on one of the other ones where he breaks down the cross. So yeah, here the next one. You said you wanted to summarize the whole thing?
Well, that was just kind of my summary of it. And then the next section, he's going to have this ongoing section, all of his pamphlets, and one's called The Living Problems Department. And this is just kind of like day-to-day writing in like Dear Abby almost. And some of these are things that he rants on. But one of these is speaking of autosuggestion. And again, this is almost in direct, contradiction to what he was saying before on the law of evolution, which is that every day, over time, things get better and they're constantly getting more and more perfect. And he says here, the war cry is day by day, in every way, I am getting better and better. But this form is too long for Americans who just change it to, oh, hell, I'm well. And he says, we can say almost anything we want to bat while we live as we do and think as we do and sleep and eat the way that we do and abuse ourselves according to fashion. There's nothing upon the face of the earth that will cure us of anything. And he's basically saying that, like, just saying day by day in every way I'm getting better, that's almost like, that sympathy card where you're just kind of catering to this mindless abstract positivity. He mentions it as a form of mental auto intoxication to convince yourself that you are what you are not, and you have gotten over that which you know you have. So yeah, again, it's interesting because depending on what section, I don't know if this is because different people wrote it, or if he was in different states of mind, or if I'm just in the wrong state of mind. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think it's you, bro. Don't ever question Daddy Manly Hall like that ever again. You show your respect. But yeah, this is coming from a guy who, by the way, died overweight and obese, overweight and diabetic, because he loved to snack at night on, I think it was like not Twinkies, but it was some.
Where there's originals, bro.
Some of this crazy sugar thing, but anyways, I think he was murdered. 100% he was murdered. But again, coming from a guy who at the end of his life was obese and all that stuff, but he still lived for a very long time. That's why I think a lot of these guys that are into the occult, they know something, because a lot of these guys live till they're like freaking 80 something years old, 90 something years old, bro. I don't know. I think they're tapping into something. but I could be wrong.
Well, they're tapping into that rich old lady money is what they're tapping into.
True, true. We have this next one here. I think I came across this on another. I think it was an.
Yeah, I figure you take this one over because you're the resident alchemist here.
I mean, I want to call myself an alchemist, but I'm pretty sure I went over this with homie Romy on some other source material that I have. But we have here Speculum Alchemia or Alchemy. The first is that you do not know how to prepare well all your things, and that you do know how to remove that which doth hurt most, and that which doth comfort your intention, and that you know the sign when you have that which you desire to have. Wow, this is really hard to read. Give me 1 second. Where was I? Remove that which ought to remove. For all that man doth hath an end, and a certain term. For according to philosophers, when nature intendeth to destroy anything, to generate another thing worse or better, it intendeth to seek a certain degree which it doth not pass beyond, and so standeth, and then another thing prepare it, doth so provoke another special form which he had not before. Wow, that sucks to read, bro. Don't make me read that again, because I'll literally shoot myself in the balls if I have to read that again. It's like when you're not used to talking a certain way, and you're reading something like some of this old English or whatever, or like, dude, reading John Dee's old journals. Oh my God. So,
or like before they even had the TH, and you have to start reading.
Yeah, dude. So
English.
The second is that your things separate you. Do know to commix them well together, and that is of sundry and divers things to make one substance to be inseparable forever. For if you know not how to mix your things well and naturally, so that everything be destroyed, and so brought first unto their own primary being and proper species, and one thing to be generated of them, it is worth nothing that you have done, and that you know the sign when your mixtion is completed.
And he's also, like, he doesn't say here, but this is also the concept of like purity, because you can't mix two impure substances together and then expect the same chemical reaction as if you're working with better quality ingredients.
Yeah, this sucks to read, bro. You read that last one, bro. My balls hurt.
Well, there's two more. The third is that you know the certain proportion, that is the quantity of such things that thou ought mix together, and also know by the reason why it should be so, and that way you can be sure to find the thing that you're looking for by the quantities that you know that you've mixed upon your melted bodies. And then he says the fourth thing that you ought to consider is the greatest secret of all, and might wisdom, that you know how to fortify your medicine and multiply the virtue, and that this is a work of great prudence and wisdom. And if you understand this last, one part of your medicine will not only convert 10 parts of any body melted, but 100, 1,000, 10,000, 10,000,000. He goes on to say, like, essentially you can just make infinite amounts if you know how. And this is that alchemical concept of multiplication, right? Of being able to take one part and turn it into like 10 or 100, or as it says, like the Christ feeding of the fish. That's kind of like another instance of this, where you take this tiny little thing and you're able to produce these enormous amounts of it. It's just an alchemical sort of analogy to something. I don't know, because that gets back into that the abstractions, right? Of like, I know the truth, and I know the concept of multiplication. Like, okay, so take this burger and just show me how to get 100,000 burgers out of it. I know it's not how it works. But again, like, until someone can actually sit down and show it to you and not just explain it in these abstractions.
So as you can tell, this is Roger Bacon, and it is very shrouded in symbolism because it is alchemy. So good luck reading that. That hurts my nutsack reading that. So we have here the symbolism of our new cross, and I was actually gonna get this made in a replica, because he made this in a pendant for his necklace, and it's to him it's a mixture of all the major religions into one coherent sign. So he breaks this whole thing down of what it all means. I'm not gonna get into the whole thing, but maybe we can
Yeah, I figure
do.
we come back to this and do the
Yeah.
plates and a whole bunch of stuff at one point, because this in particular is interesting to me because this cross design was so damn important
Mm-hmm.
to Daddy Hall that it would just be interesting to know the thinking that goes behind all of it. Because again, he was like this cross to Hall would be like a movie to Stanley Kubrick, right? Like every detail sort of is in there for a reason, and there's like a whole story behind every color and the angle at which it was all put in there and everything.
So here he is wearing it, and it was designed by him summer of 1923, and it represents the composite of the emblems and figures of various mystery schools gathered to form one harmonious pattern, thus signifying the unification of all religions and philosophical doctrines to one perfect, beautiful unit, a condition which must be first come to pass before the ideals of universal brotherhood can be realized. So this was given to Walter Stewart, who was Manly P. Hall's last ministerial student in the Church of the People, and it's currently protected by Circe's International and Order Surveying. And oil painting was made. So yeah, so I think that was the church that he was the pastor at 21. This is a look at this, how young he is, bro.
And he designed this before he even went on his like worldwide
Yeah.
travels to join all these other societies. So I wonder if he came back and he was like, "Damn it, I forgot a triangle."
Yeah, that shit is wrong. Well, you got the triangle up here.
Yeah.
Got two triangles. So I was gonna get this made actually. That's how big of a Manly P. Hall fanboy I am. I wanted to get a replica made, but I never did get around to that. So but here it is. It's got like diamonds and everything on it. There's also another picture.
It looks like something you could ward off a vampire with in style.
So in the people that I told you about earlier, he married them at his house, and he had this on. He had they have a picture with him where he has the cross on at their wedding when he married them together. So it's really interesting. But yeah, we can get into that some other time because it is pretty detailed. And we have here.
So he's got some Q&As here. My favorite one is just, do dreams mean anything? I don't know if you see that one on here, but
Yeah,
I'm just gonna stop with his first sentence. So the question is, do dreams mean anything? Answer: some do and some do not. And I just decided to just keep moving on after that because I just like I like the matter of fact answer there.
Yeah, my son today was asking me if dreams were bad, and he's 4 years old. So I'm like, I mean, that I told him something similar. I'm like, well, it depends, because I was gonna be like, I don't like to say no to everything. Like, oh, dreams bad? No, they're good. It's like, but why did I just have a nightmare? You know what I mean? So I was like, why did you have a bad dream that you didn't like? And I forgot what he told me, but he was asking me today if dreams were bad or not.
It's an interesting question.
It isn't. He asked some crazy. He's like, what is knowing? I'm like, I'm trying to come up with when you can't define a word with using the word, you want to define something with using the word in the definition. And like, there's a reason why they ask you what it means, because you can't use the word that they just asked you what it meant in the definition of the word. So he's like, what is knowing? And I'm just trying to think of a different way to say things that you're
just pulling up a thesaurus on your phone and just throwing all the other words at him.
Yeah, bro. I'm like,
it's understanding, comprehending.
What is understand? Because he'll do that, bro. I have to be careful with what I say, because he'll pull out another one like, oh, what does that mean? I go, oh. It's like, what are roads made out of? They're made out of gravel.
Why?
What is
Why?
gravel?
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
What is gravel? Well, it's a stone. What is a stone? It comes from mountains. What is a mountain? So I have to keep going. It's like an endless cycle, but yeah. So we have the other
honestly, that's the Socratic method, man. Like, from the mouths of babes, right?
I mean, if you're 4 years old, then I'm okay with it. But if you're a grown ass man like Thomas here asking me questions like that, I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up.
Well, when you're talking about reptilians in Atlantis, sometimes you gotta like start pulling those layers of the onion apart.
Here you go. What's the next one, bro?
The onion is a spherical globe.
Yeah, it is. Don't you're gonna trigger some people on that.
So the law of non-attachment, um, and I'm not even gonna read the whole thing, but it basically he just starts going on the same concept of sort of like the Eastern philosophy of, you know, give up all your possessions. What's the new the Carl Schwab version now is own nothing and you'll be happy. It's essentially the esoteric and enlightened version of eating cockroaches and mealworms is don't be attached to anything in the material realm, which, you know, easier said than done. But I think
That's
that one's
very
not so.
platonic
What
too.
is?
Like the attachment is the base of sorrow, the parent of crime, the inspiration of lust, and the causeless cause of
Because
limitations.
you're latching on to the
Exactly.
non-ideal versions of things, so that,
Exactly.
yeah, to be fascinated with like what looks like a perfect circle means that you'll never appreciate a true perfect circle in the abstract
Well, he
sense. But
says it right
again,
there. He says it.
abstractions, right?
He says that the sage is free in the realization of the immortal reality, while the fool is chained a prisoner by his acceptance of the immortality of matter.
This when I read that, the sage is free of realization while the fool is chained. It's like the meme of the guy at the party and everyone's having a good
Yeah, he's
time,
like
but
in
like
the
there's
corner.
one dude in the corner and he's sitting there. He's like, they don't realize I'm a free sage and I'm not bound to the realization of this immortal reality. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna make that meme right now, dude. I'm gonna share it on that. That was amazing, dude. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So any while you make that meme up, he says, "There is but one consciousness, and it is not in matter, but there is but one truth, and that is the realization of immortal purity. There is but one quest, the search for reality. There's but one reward, the attainment of reality. There's but one devotion, and that the love of reality. There is but one sin, the loss of reality. There is but one death, the death of reality." This almost sounds like a Catholic sermon, I swear to God. You know, like the saying the same thing over and over. But I thought that one was really interesting, where especially he says there's but one sin, the loss of the reality. Because you know, that's almost sounds blasphemous in some ways, which is kind of like the heart of a lot of these like esoteric teachings or things that when you read them out of context like that, it just sounds like pure blasphemy. And then he says that when the clouded soul of man loses sight of the star of truth that gleams through the veil of Maya, as the clouds of the old concealed body of deity, again, he doesn't say God, he's saying deity. That was
Yep.
interesting you pointed that out. So the clouds of attachment shroud the truth in a winding sheet of limitation. And again, Daddy Hall, bro, you're starting to get a little abstract here. But I like the analogies, right? That hermetic thought of above, so below, of like just speaking in similes and metaphors and stuff. But I kind of love when he talks about like reality as being the ultimate end all be all. But again, like in his abstractions, like there's nothing more abstract than the truth. And I would say that the truth and reality with a capital R are kind of the same abstract concept.
Yo, hit me with that meme again. They don't know I'm a what?
Oh, what does he say? He says that they don't know that I'm free in the realization of the immortal reality.
Making
Yep.
memes real time.
There you
Hold on. Let's see here. Let's switch this around. There we go. Do you like the other font or that font?
It always needs to be impact. Impacts the meme font.
No, I'm
That's the
saying, but
correct
with like
font.
the white interior, black exterior, or the other way around.
Go with that one.
They don't know I'm free in the realization of the immortal reality. Is that? I'm free.
That's it. That's what he says here.
All right.
The sage is free in the realization of the immortal reality, while the fool is chained a prisoner by his acceptance of the immortality of matter.
Should we add that second part in there?
No. I mean, no.
If you know, you know. Hashtag if you
Yeah,
know, you know.
yeah.
All right. Awesome. Here we go. Making memes in real time as we go about these episodes.
And he goes, honestly, some of this stuff, it sounds very, I'm 14 and this is deep or whatever the Reddit is. But he's let us
What?
watch. You ever heard of that before?
No.
There's a subreddit. I think it's called I'm 14 and this is deep, and it's just like things that would be really deep to someone that just got into middle school and is just like learning about books outside of the Berenstain Bears and Goosebumps. But this passage kind of strikes me as that, I'm 14 and this is deep. Let us watch people with whom we daily pass, slaves to attachments, crushed by ignorance, little better than beasts. They are who know when nor why, but like little puppets in a shadow show, follow the strings they've placed upon themselves. Like this is the whole sheeple, you stupid puppets. I love it.
Spit on you.
I say that, but I love the way that he has that condescension sometimes.
Yeah, this dude was on some imagine the stuff that was going through his head, bro. I mean, he was
Could you imagine small talk with him? You'd be going on about the weather and he'd just be like, God, this fucking idiot won't shut up about the weather, bro.
Here we go. This is going to get controversial here. You ready? This is all you, bro. You're the one that I want to do this.
So this one stood out to me. And man, I mean, Manly Palmer Hall would have been banned from YouTube and Twitter. No question about it. So he's got this section that caught me off guard in the Christmas issue, which a coincidence maybe that vaccinations tend to come up around Christmas and December, but he's got a section called The Crime of Vaccination. And he says, this is Manly P. Hall, the karmic debt for vaccination is twofold. First, to our bodies, which we deliberately defile with smallpox serum and vaccine. Secondly, to the animal who goes through untold suffering. And then he says, the occultist is fighting tooth and nail to abolish vaccination and supplant it with good common sense. Smallpox is primarily a filth disease. And if people would live right and bathe right and eat right,
not be so fucking poor.
For the healthy body is perfectly capable of taking care of its germs. Yeah, but this is like such an interesting thing. Again, to read 100 years back into the past and hear this sort of occult, new age, conspiratorial even version of not trusting vaccines. But for his point of view, it was smallpox at the time. And it took me by surprise because honestly I wouldn't have assumed this particular stance back then from like a cultist being against that. I mean, I understand it. It's the same sort of premise now.
Where is your source material for that, bro? You can't just say some crazy shit like that and not source it.
For what?
The occultist is fighting tooth and nail. So are you talking about conspiracy theorists or like so Alex Jones?
Says, in my opinion, whenever Manly Palmer Hall says the occultist, he means me. So it's like I'm fighting tooth and nail to abolish vaccination.
It's like when you're talking about, it's like these people, I'm me, I'm the people, that's me, that meme. So I love the fact where he goes here where it says, where is it? Where does it start? Oh, it's a long ass sentence. We look forward with great hopes to the day when we will remove from the fair name of our race the blemish, mental and physical, the swollen glands, the tonsil trouble, the nervousness and debility, the rashes and outbreaks, not a small percentage of which can be traced to vaccine, which kills the best in us in order to save the rest. You selfish fucks. So
no comment. But I mean, without question, he would have been anti-vax. Manly Palmer Hall would have been in the anti-vax category.
What do you have though?
He was right here. He's talking about the karmic debt is twofold. I mean, that seems like a pretty strong stance to backpedal from.
But then you're gonna not oppose capitalism because that's part of capitalism.
What is vaccinations?
Yeah, bro. It's all about making money.
No,
dude.
Not at all. I don't think so at all.
Yes, come on.
The version that we had here was corporatism more than anything else. It was just a transfer of state research and state funds and state guinea pigs. Like there was no, like the only capitalization there was the literal capitalization of people and turning them into, you know, money through. And again, the origin of what's the word capital, right? The origin of the word capital and the origin of the word vaccine both share a cow being their,
because it was
their
cowpox,
root, right?
the first outbreak, the first time that they invented the vaccine. Yeah.
Well, and per capita essentially meant like per cattle.
Oh, really?
You know, per capita was like per head of cattle,
shit.
essentially.
Damn, dude, I think we just unlocked a new conspiracy. It's all linked back to the cow.
So let's go from anti-vax to another spicy topic, because at the very opening of issue 3 in volume 2, Manly, I don't know if he wrote this poem or if it was commissioned by someone, but it's The Unborn, and it's basically a poem about abortion. And
oh god.
And I'm just going to jump right to the highlights, but he says, longing through the silent ages for a mother who would care. And then it ends with mortal hands you still their hearts. And just I guess as I was reading this, I was just imagining like this is the surgeon with the scalpel and the vacuum, you know, with the little vacuum extension. With mortal hands you still their hearts and cast their broken forms aside, murdering souls and slaying bodies with criminal thoughtlessness and pride. On your hands is blood of murder, on your soul a blacker stain. Mother of mercy, have compassion on the slayer and the slain.
All right, question, bro. Because, and this is gonna be pretty ignorant of me, but I think people should do whatever they want. I think people should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies. Is that a left-leaning or right-leaning ideology?
I don't know. I don't really think that it belongs on one side.
But who are the ones that usually fight for abortion rights? Is it leftists or
right now in current day in the US, it's usually would be like a leftist would be fighting for
so liberal thought
choice.
For the choice.
Yeah.
And then so if you're a conservative, it would be you're a murderer, you're not allowed to do that. So but okay, so
if those
Manly
are the only two buckets you can pick between, then yeah, those are kind of like the two big buckets.
So based on the last two articles that we've read, we can safely assume that Manly P. Hall was probably a conservative.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the whole like God helps those who help themselves mentality and pull yourself up by your bootstraps
and fuck your baby sugar mama.
And sympathy is the worst thing that's ever happened in the entire universe was the concept of sympathy. So even if you wanted to be like the extremists and like, you know, Republicans hate everyone and they just want to watch you. So I mean, technically, if you're sitting there,
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
And if you're saying that sympathy is the worst thing that's ever happened in the universe, then yeah, I guess then he would fit that mold of like the stereotype.
So on to the next one, because this episode has already gone off the rails. If you didn't think we were going to touch these subjects while reading about Manly P. Hall, boy, oh boy, were you absolutely wrong. So we have thoughts for the here.
So he makes another mention in here, and this one stood out because he says, occult schools are indeed mystic organizations, and entrance to them is man's pledged oath and vow. Many people object to oaths and vows, but there are some which we must take as we go along the line. Like I love the reasoning there.
Well, the way you deliver that is amazing. It's like, oh, well, it's not bad if you have to do it. You know, like you're like it's for the necessary.
Well, and again, the context, right, is that he literally just said that he was about to travel the globe, and as you mentioned, he didn't say this, but basically entering all these different initiations and stuff. So like how like this is him like some people are opposed to it, but there's like a really good reason why you might want to do this. I'm not going to get into it, but trust me, bro.
Exactly.
Like, that's the source, right?
Because by him saying that, in order for you to learn all the secrets and be able to write an entire encyclopedia, well, you need to be initiated, my dude. You know what I mean? This dude was probably drinking concoctions out of people's skulls somewhere in the desert or in the middle of a jungle at one point to learn the secrets of the secrets. So
I mean, like OG Indiana Jones at some level, right?
Yeah,
he he hired an Indiana Jones to like go ahead of him.
Yeah, exactly. So here he's covering his tracks like, hey, bro, sometimes you gotta do, they are moral obligations which the body must assume and live up to. So whenever somebody tells you anything about, when I'm eating a Twinkie or something, they're like, you're gonna get fat. No. Many people, where was it? We must pledge ourselves. Where the fuck did I just read it? Oh, they are moral obligations which the body must assume and live up to. Damn it!
Well, you skipped the first part of that sentence, which is just as important, where he says they are not pledges made to others. Well, that's kind of bullshit. Like if you go and you read some of the actual pledges to some of these groups that he's talking about, they are not metaphorical in no uncertain terms. They literally say that like you will not provide oath to Prince Potentiate or like any other person on the face of the planet. So it's almost like I always wonder, is it the first oath that takes priority, or if I go through and I take 20 oaths, is it the 20th one that overrides the first 19 that I did, or do they all just like invalidate each other? Or is it like marriage where like it's the first one and then every other marriage contract is null and void? It's only like the first one.
I got you. Well, he did marry what? 2 times? 3 times? 2 times. No, his first wife killed herself. He married a second time. So, I don't know, dude. I think we should do on the Juan podcast, we should do an entire episode on Manly P. Hall.
His Manly P. Hall's love life, and we'll just trace it through the cashed checks.
Yes.
So there's a section in here called the Greatly Slandered Playing Card, and it might be after all of these fictional ones.
Yeah, I skipped all this too when I was going through it. Oh, and I want to read. Oh, well, we can do this. There's actually an entire.
It's before that. It comes before that, actually.
So for the Occult Anatomy, we do. Oh, you put it on here, but there's an entire book on just that.
So there's a section. I don't know if you'll find it, but it says. Right here. The greatly slandered playing card. In this day and age of the world, the playing card is a terribly slandered thing that is far more sinned against than sinning. Our churches look askance at us if when pulling out our handkerchief, poker chips roll out or an ace of spades flutters to the floor. What a cool, image, right? That you're in church and like you pull your handkerchief out and for some reason you've got poker chips in your pocket. That would probably indicate a gambling problem. But anyways. It is not realized that the deck of the cards is the oldest known Bible, having been inscribed upon the walls of the Temple of Seraphim in Egypt thousands of years ago. It's also a complete symbol of the Masonic Lodge, of the mystery schools, and the story of initiation. It's a man who has made it into gambling thing, but of itself, like all other creations, it is good and remains good until we make evil out of it. And then you were talking about dice before. He says, modern dice are taken from the altars of the ancient gods and their faces, adding up to 7, and those are the symbols of the Mosaic Law. The roulette wheel was originally used in temples to represent the motion of the planets, and practically all of our so-called gambling games and implements were originally sacred things.
Mm-hmm.
The evil side of them lies entirely in the minds of men, and they could all get together, card roulette wheel, and justifiably sing a little song entitled, "You Made Me What I Am Today. I Hope You're Satisfied." But that blew my mind when I was reading that. Like, yeah, that's true, right? The cards were the original tarot, and the tarot and the Torah, like that was the original Bible, essentially. And that's essentially what we've got in our standard, it's gone through some changes, but the standard tech of playing cards. And then he mentions the dice being taken from the altars of the ancient gods and their faces, and that the the roulette wheel representing the motion of the planets. What a cool idea. I never even considered all of these gambling items as being sacred things from an altar.
Wonder where you guys sourced from, huh? Oh well, guess we'll never know, because and I'll be honest, dude, I don't even know how many things I've repeated of Manly Halls without having the source material, except Manly Hall. I'll be honest. Because it's things like this, but it makes a lot of sense though, right? Where, what is it? The roulette represents the motion of the planets, and you also have the what's the card? The Wheel of Fortune card, the tarot card, where you have that. Let me pull it out. I restored. Remember, I did that deck, the Augustus and Manly Hall
John
deck.
Augustus Snap. Yeah, John Augustus Snap.
I did a replica of the deck. I restored all the pictures, photoshopped them, and I had them printed. It's from the original deck. Is from like 1928, I think, or 32, something like that.
There you go. That's the original Bible.
Yeah, I got the Chariot card, but yeah, I did Manly P Hall fanboy, so I am, but it's really, really interesting. Yeah, I didn't understand, but the way I learned about the dice was learning about the Pythagorean palaces, where the dice, the cube, is the progenitor of all number. So the way that they paint it is, first comes the dot, which is the monad, then comes the line, then comes I forget the order, but the last one being number 4, which is the cube, and the cube births into reality everything else, any other form that comes after that. And that's Pythagorean idea, where they thought that the cube was the perfect shape. And the reason being, again, this has a more occultic meaning behind it. So, again, very interesting. But moving along here, let's see what else we got. We got the Occult Anatomy of Man. I've read that whole thing. We should do that one sometime. Add it to the endless.
With the human brain. Well, there was one thing that stood out to me that
there's an entire, he does an entire, it's like I guess it's like a pamphlet, but it's like a bunch of pages on the Occult Anatomy of Man. And he breaks everything down. It's really fascinating. We should do that one. It's not that long. But go ahead and you can read this one.
So I'm just gonna hop around, but he's talking about the human brain, and he mentions that that it is up this. He's talking about the skull, of course, representing the temple on the mountaintop, and the dome is the dome of the head, and that up this mountain, the spirit fire climbs on its path of liberation, passing upward through 33 steps of Masonic initiation, which are, of course, the vertebrae of the spine.
You can't say that word.
And it enters. Yeah, we'll have to edit that out. It enters the domed room of the skull, where the great mystery initiations are given. And then it says that in the cerebellum or rear brain, which has a charge of the motive system of the human body, which is the highest brain of the animal, is found a little tree-like growth, which has long been symbolized as the sprig of acacia referred to in the Masonic allegory. And he mentioned this in the earlier one where he's talking about Hiram Abiff. And Hiram Abiff, I believe, dies and is buried, and then they find a little sprig of acacia growing out from where he was buried, which kind of represents that concept of reincarnation here. And then it also says that the skull is a little room with a hole in the floor, often referred to in the ancient mysteries, for the main opening of the skull is through which the spinal cord with its nerves pass, and that medical science now knows that the spinal cord is really an elongation of the brain, and it is capable of intelligence like the brain. The cord is a flaming sword which stands at the gates of the Garden of Eden, which is the human skull, and the Greek god Atlas carried the heavens on his shoulders, and the upper vertebrae of the spine is called the atlas, and the skull articulating with this bone, which is provided with rockers, gives us that back and forward motion of the head. And this in itself sufficient proof of the analogy exists between ancient and modern worlds. So that one was cool. Honestly, just the concept of the spinal cord being this elongated aspect of the brain and that it has its own intelligence actually is really true, and I never even considered that before. I read this old ass pamphlet from 1923 from the cultist.
You can cut somebody's head off and their body will still move, or not cut somebody's head off, but cut like an animal's head off and it can still move around, right? Like a snake.
Have you ever seen those Russian experiments where they take dogs apart and keep them alive? And
That's messed up. But yeah, absolutely. So the original pamphlet, I guess. So let's see here. It was a book. It was only 72 pages. The Occult Anatomy of Man, Manly P. Hall, to which is added a treatise on occult masonry. So it's 72 pages. We should definitely do that one. I've read it before, and it's really fascinating because it breaks down. So it takes like this Christian perspective, where it takes all Christian stories and breaks it down, and it shows it how it relates to like the anatomy of man. So right, Christ was crucified at the place of the skull, so Golgotha. And then if you look at the I forgot what it was, the top of the skull is called something. Anyways, it's a whole thing, which we should definitely do it. So
I love that idea though, because it kind of emphasizes that concept that these like ancient sacred teachings are encoded with, like actual worldly knowledge. So like maybe all these stories are, in addition to everything else that they're supposed to stand for, maybe they also are talking about, human anatomy, which would just kind of be cool because it's like the one story that explains all other stories.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like it's like how we were talking about at the beginning, it's the universal language. So of course they're going to use symbols, and these symbols are going to change according to your cultural influences, your community influences, your familial influences, your culture, like all that stuff is going to influence it. It's going to transform it, that same symbol, into something that you're able to understand. I think you said at the beginning, where people are bringing forth what they're able to comprehend, like the forms that you're able to deal with, and that's your reality. I think it might have been a podcast I was listening to. I'm not sure. Everything's a blur nowadays.
Yeah, you read this one.
Why? You don't want to get canceled, bro?
I mean, I don't care.
All right. So, will the white race ever be dominated by a superior people? So, what's he trying to say, that the white race is already the most superior? So, okay. So he says, answer: the white race, with its heartless domination over lesser peoples, has made the karmic debt, which can only be paid off by our own race, bowing beneath the heels of some coming conqueror. Yikes.
So yes, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. We've got it coming towards us. And
but imagine, he says the white race with its heartless domination over lesser peoples. So he's like, as he was white, wasn't he? He was white. He was Canadian.
Yeah.
So it being some white dude being like, yeah, dude, our people were assholes. So of course they're gonna have to bow down to the next people. But hey, slavery was still legal at this time, by the way. Racism was super, super prevalent because it was the 20s. So just putting that out there, because it was a norm of the time. Not saying it's okay, but I'm just saying that these guys are. Do you think Manly P. Hall's a racist dude? Oh, I don't want to think about that.
I think so. Yeah.
You think he was a fucking racist?
I think he was racist. Maybe not in that he like hated anyone that wasn't like him, but I think he was racist in that he probably saw someone's race and then made a bunch of assumptions about them. Yeah, I absolutely think that sounds like part of his MO.
Yikes. Okay. All right.
And then again, he's got so we're in issue 4 now, and he has a section called The Philosophy of the Absolute, and this is another one of his like Mickey Rooney complainy articles, and he says,
it's like nobody's gonna want to read these after we're done with them, because you're making a point. You're like painting him out to be like this cranky old, like esoteric.
I mean, sometimes he is, especially because in the first volume, and I think the very first issue of the second volume, he has this whole article on like being cranky and like don't be this like old crank. But again, it's just the way that I'm reading it. But it's like people that start things out like there's only 2 kinds of people in this, like they're about to put themselves into the nice one and then like put everyone else in the bad one, right?
Yeah.
No one's ever like, there's 2 kinds of people in this world, and they put themselves into the crap one. That never happens. So he says it again. There's 2 kinds of people in this world: people with a vision and people without vision. Guess guess what category Manly P. Hall thinks that he's in. So he says, people with a vision who claim to have surrounded the absolute and are those without a vision. So again, this is just I didn't get deep into like all the extra points that he was making here. Just the fact that this starts this trend that we're going to notice a lot more often, where he's constantly like, you're either with us or you're against us, kind of like that same feel.
Well, the people who are not with us, Tom, they're called Gluck McFags. So
Yeah.
the second member of the Celestial Trinity we are considering in our little spasm is Gluck McFag, a well-known disciple of things vacuumized.
I feel like this is something that Manly P. Hall wrote.
Can you imagine him stubbing his toe and be like, fuck? Just like cursing or something? You think he cursed? He's, incarnations or something. I don't know. I can't even imagine Manly P. Hall doing something like that. So anyways, we have here, let's see. These are also stories, right?
This one has a lot of the fictional stories. This one I just went right to the Q&A, and there was a really interesting one that I found.
Yeah,
and,
so we'll come back and do these stories sometimes, because
all the fictional ones we'll do in order so we can talk about the story as a whole. So the question is, can a man live forever if he will not sin? And I don't actually care about the answer that he gives later on as the result of this, but I really like the beginning of the answer. It says, if a man does not sin, he will turn to stone. Sin produces experience. What we call sin and suffering is one of our greatest friends. We sin and break a natural law. If we do not suffer, we would soon find ourselves destroyed and never know it. And the way that I read this, because first of all, again, it sounds very blasphemous of like, what we call sin and suffering is one of our greatest friends. Unless you could also read that as like the Mother Teresa criticisms, where like she thought that suffering was the true way to like, salvation, so that she kind of intentionally had people suffer more than they needed to, because like it was, godly almost. But there's another aspect of this of like, we would soon find ourselves destroyed and never know it. And that like this being one of our greatest friends, I also wonder if this ties into that like spectrum of like, the greater experiences, the more choices you have, the closer it resembles itself to like free will almost.
And I think your reincarnated doppelganger wrote in because he says, explain sex. And the answer that Manly gives is, sex manifests through all the regions of nature as the two polarities of one nature. That's it, dude. Holy shit. So when my kid asks me, hey, Dad, what happens during sex? I'm going to memorize this. Sex manifests through all the regions of nature as the two polarities of one nature. His head is going to explode, bro.
That's not what it says on Pornhub.
So, yeah, that was a really cool one, too. And I think that's pretty much it for this one, because everything else...
Yeah, we'll rapid fire through the next two, because we kind of just jump around a little bit. And
you have a side quest too, right?
Yeah, I do.
So here we go.
The next one. So in issue 5 of volume 2, there was the right here we've got the brazen serpent on the tau cross, which always just stood out to me because my name's starting with a T. So whenever I see this tau cross, I always feel like it's like speaking to me or something. But if you're not familiar with this particular symbol, I think it's an ode to Moses, and he had this like staff that apparently people were getting sick. They were getting bitten by snakes, and they had like snake bites, and they were dying of snake venom. And this is one of the reasons why they would refer to like these fiery serpents, or these flaming serpents, which also apparently shared a name with seraphim. So the seraphim that came down onto Earth and these flaming serpents could potentially be the the word of the same thing. But this particular instance, a bunch of people were getting sick from these snake bites, which they called fiery serpents, because if you got the venom in you, it felt like your body was just like burning up from the inside. And the cure was that they put this snake on the staff, and if you looked at the snake, he rose it up in front of the people, and if you just looked at it, you'd be cured of like the venom. And this later gets quoted in the Bible later on, where they talk about like raise me up as Moses did the staff with the snake on it. They're talking about like, yeah, well, I mean, they're literally talking about like a metaphor, but this is the OG story of the serpent on the snake. And another aspect of this is that it was like whoever has the biggest snake wins, and it literally Moses takes the snake on the staff and raises it up, and it essentially consumes all the other magic snakes and staffs from all the Egyptian pharaohs. And because Moses had the biggest, baddest, the most magical snake, it basically just absorbed all the other magical snakes out there.
Dude.
And this became a symbol, this brazen serpent on the staff or on the cross, of that one particular event. But it's got so many deeper dives on it. And
I got a deeper dive on it.
Yeah, go for it.
That's why you need the biggest dog dick, because the biggest dog dick is going to absorb.
It absorbs all the other dog dicks.
All the other. Dude, we should put that in the comic, bro. We should put like a dog dick eating all their dog dicks somewhere, like a little Easter egg somewhere.
Well, I think that every once in a while there'll be like a guy chasing a dog with a huge dick. Like he found it, but now
with
he
a
has
machete.
Yeah.
Like running after him, trying to get it to make his homunculus.
So my side quest on this was just because I've
because you're a Freemason.
Yeah, well, I got this compendium to Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, and there was this long ass article about from Albert Pike, and I'll read the part that seemed the most interesting to me. And just to be clear, I've got no idea what half of this even means, because it's like way over my head. But it's got a lot of cool buzzwords that pique my interest constantly. And there's this compendium book that goes along with it, breaks it down a little bit more, but basically in Scottish Rite, the 25th degree is the Night of the Brazen Serpent, which is a direct reference to this, serpent on the Talcross. So I'll read part of it, and it's that let's see. And this is from Morals and Dogma, Night of the Brazen Serpent. The cosmogony of the Hebrews and that of the Gnostics designated this reptile as the author of the fate of souls. It was consecrated in the mysteries of Bacchus and those of Eleusis. Pluto overcame the virtue of Persephone under the form of a serpent, and like an Egyptian god, Serapis was always pictured seated on a serpent, and with that reptile entwined about him. It's also found on the Mithraic monuments and supplied to the Typhon of the Egyptians. The sacred basilisk and coil, with its head and neck erect, was the royal ensign of the pharaohs. Two of them entwined around and hung suspended of the winged globe of the Egyptian monument. On a tablet at the tombs of Thebes, a god with a spear pierces a serpent's head. On the tablet from the temple of Osiris is a tree with a man on one side, a woman on the other, and in front of the woman an erect basilisk with horns on its head and a disc between the horns. The head of Medusa was encircled by winged snakes, which the head removed of the sacred cipher of the Ophites and serpent worshippers, and the serpent in connection with the globe or circle is found upon the monuments of all ancient nations. So this is basically OG Albert Pike just breaking down all the different places where serpents come up. And the very introduction to this 25th degree, he writes, the degree of the Night of the Brazen Serpent relates to a time when the camp of Israelites was pitched on the eastern side of the mountains, and the death of Aaron when the new moon occurred at the vernal equinox in the 40th year of wandering, and the children of Israel. The duties of a Night of the Brazen Serpent are to purify the soul of its alloy of earthliness, and that through the gate of Capricorn and the seven spheres it may at length ascend to its eternal home beyond the stars, and to perpetuate the great truths enveloped in the symbols and allegories of all ancient mysteries. Sounds a lot like a lot of cool words all put together. Something that Manly P. Hall would come across and just like jizz himself, right? So again, this is like that Albert Pike OG breakdown of it. And if you see that the one with the three images, if you scroll down the black and white, yeah, it's got. So the one on the right is the order, the one in the middle is called the jewel, and the one on the left is the apron. So the jewel there is that towel cross with the serpent. And those three images are directly from Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. It's an illustration from this chapter on the brazen serpent.
And what year was Pike?
Contemporary of Hall, but he was born before Hall.
Like
was.
early 1800, early 1900s. That he was
Pike's, heyday was still the late 1800s.
All right, what year was Hall born? Wasn't it like 1901, right?
Yeah, because he was in his 20s when he wrote all this stuff.
So check that out.
That was the side quest I went on was specifically about the symbolism of the brazen serpent and the snake on the towel cross and everything.
And I did a whole entire episode on serpent worship and the serpent symbolism with Gabe and Dr. Ionescu, where we got into the history of this reptilian or serpent snake worship in antiquity, in Greek, and all these stuff. We talk about the Gnostics and all that.
I think one of the practical explanation for the snake on the cross and everything was that in this particular region of the world at that time, venomous snakes were around, and it happened often enough that they actually developed their own minor god of snake anti-venom. And this might have been like the original towel cross with a snake on it might have come from the worship of that minor god that specifically resembled snake venom, which would also explain why this was the motion when they put the snake on the staff and held it up and said, if you look at this, you'll be cured of the venom. That might be an actual echo of the original minor snake god. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And also that again, in Hebrew, the word for fiery serpent is the same as it is for seraphim, as it is for these like the brazen serpent, essentially, the ones that were coming out of the sky and biting people.
Yes, yeah, and that's really interesting. The whole Moses connection, all that stuff, and the way it's looked up to in secret societies. It just makes you think, right?
So there was in the Q&A of this one, again, this issue 5,
a bunch of stories in this one.
There's a bunch of stories in this one, but when I went to the Q&A, there's a couple examples of, again, like Daddy Hall being sort of, I guess we'd say like a conservative by today's standards. And one of the questions is, can we get anything we want by wishing for it? Answer, yes, if we wish to work. Which I love that one. That's like such a dad response. You know what I mean? There's another one that kind of took me by surprise. What's the best way to free oneself from the clutches of a hypnotist? So this is like someone legitimately writing in the Manly P. Hall.
I think they're
I guess thought they were a mind control victim. And he just like, power positive thinking. The only possible way is developing a positive willpower and making it stronger of that of the operator. So he's literally talking about overpowering your mind control, operator, which is kind of cool. And then the last one, who is God? And again, this is in classic matter of fact answering form. God, as he is now generally understood, man and the universe are various stages in the concrete manifestation of the absolute. Like, okay, damn. I mean, why not just like put that at the beginning in issue 1, volume 1, right? Just like, here's what God is.
Yo, what's your sign, bro?
Gemini.
Did they do Gemini already?
The Two-Face.
Yeah, Two-Face. No, I don't think they did the...
No, I've been looking out for it. We'll get to it.
All right, cool. Yeah, and then we have... we had one more in here that I wanted to read. Where is it? Oh, you had this one too. Please name some occult literature that is good for the beginner to study. Is the one that you mentioned earlier.
Oh yeah. This might be a good one for us to follow for some Occult Book Club reviews.
The Sorrows of I've never even heard of any of these books. So we have.
So he says the Brother of the Third Degree by Garver. I'm not sure who that is. The Dweller on Two Planets by Philos. Miriam of the Mystic Brotherhood by Howard. The Romance of Two Worlds by Barbarous. The Sorrows of Satan and Life Everlasting by Marie Corelli. And he lists those as fictional writings.
Interesting. It says the writings of Jacob Boehme, Andrew Jackson Davis, and Emmanuel Swedenborg are excellent from the mystic standpoint. Sibley, Raphael William, Lilly, and Nicholas Culpeper are good in astrology. The Secret Doctrines, Isis Unveiled, and the Key to Theosophy by Madame Blavatsky.
Someone else thought those were good books to follow too. Right?
Yeah, exactly. The Cosmo of Conception by Max Heindel are the best of occult works of modern times. Spencer Huxley,
yeah. My ears perked up when I saw that one too.
And Plato lead in scientific research and philosophy, while H.G. Wells has written an excellent history of the world. So I'll keep that name in mind, Huxley. That name is connected to a lot of things in history. So
and I have little doubt that he specifically means Aldous Huxley here, because I think him and Aldous Huxley were around the same age around this time.
I believe so. Yeah, they were contemporaries too. So what do we have here? And then you want to get into the last one, which was it he writes about the breastplate, right?
Yeah. So again, in the very first issue, it had the golden chocolate bar with the 12 squares, and I didn't know what the hell it was. So he actually breaks it down at the very end of this issue. He's got all sorts of and we can just kind of read over that. Yeah, this right here, the breastplate of the high priest. But before you get there, because this will probably end this one off, he also earlier in this issue kind of has these like eight steps for living life. And again, some of these are like really weird, and I don't agree with all of them, but it was interesting from his point of view. So Manly Palmer Hall's 8 steps to living a better life. 1, do not mourn for that which is lost, for the more you mourn, the more you lose. All right, don't cry over spilled milk. That one makes sense. We've all heard that one before. Do not weep because you are weak, because you get weaker if you weep. That one's an interesting one. Does that mean that like the more you cry, the bigger of a pussy you become? That's kind of how it reads. Or like, don't cry just because of how weak you are, because crying over how weak you are makes you even weaker. But whatever. Like, honestly, maybe you've got a good job lined up, bro. Like, there's people out there making bank at being good at crying. So
he's telling me not to be a pussy. Is that what Manly Hall's trying to do?
I mean, get a job. Like he's telling you all these things. He's Angry Daddy Hall.
I would have loved to have him as a mentor growing up, bro.
I mean, just to show you how to hunt down those cougars with the paychecks. Right? Do not wring your hands or wave them in the air. If you do, you will not have enough strength to walk with later. All right. I'm not sure I got that one. I read it over a few times.
Right over my head.
I'm not going to pretend. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like I understand the deeper meaning. When you are happy and do not laugh, figure out the joke, and you'll probably find out it's not very funny after all. Again, this is like the dude in the corner of the party, like, I got the joke, I just didn't think it was funny. You know what I mean? Like, I'm too smart to laugh at this stupid
There's
joke.
always that one guy.
They don't know I'm what a great meme, though. You should put the little Manly Palmer Hall cross on around the guy's neck
on his shirt.
Put his little cross on there.
What was it? What article was that from? I'm trying to remember now. That was was it the abstractions?
The breakdown of the cross?
No, where was this from? The realization of immortal reality. That was the stage one. Which one was that one?
Oh, the meme? Oh man, I don't know. I'll have to go
Anyways,
It was the law of non-attachment, which was in issue 2.
all right, I'll look for it.
Yeah, the law of non-attachment. So okay, so anyways, we were on number 4, which was like sometimes you're too smart for a joke. When you think that loud laughter is a symbol of intelligence and affability, remember that some inmates of the lunatic asylum laugh all the time. So again, this sounds like crabby Manly P. Hall. Like he literally heard someone tell a joke and everyone got it and he didn't get it, and it just made him feel like an idiot, and he was stewing on it for like a week.
It was so mad.
He wrote up 2 laws of how to live your life, and they both revolve around being too smart to get a joke and to not feel bad if you don't get a joke. So there feels like there's something personal here. Do not weep because you are ruined, for you are ruining your nervous system also when you do. So apparently he was crying a lot, and he was not getting jokes around this time.
Well, also, I want to point out that Manly P. Hall was also writing like self-help books too, by the way. It wasn't just all occult type of stuff. There was some like how to live a happier life, how to read your Bible correctly, how to, like, he was doing like self-help stuff all at the same time, like here and there whenever he was writing stuff. So maybe that's,
I mean, that same category kind of blends over today too, right? Like all the self-help always blends into like esoteric thought and philosophy and stuff.
Exactly.
And then he says, do not walk around in circles. You'll never get any further than yourself if you do. Yeah, okay, that's a pretty basic one. And then the last one, number 8. This one, again, I'm reading this in the context of like Daddy Hall just is about to marry these these rich.
He never married them. They wanted to marry him.
He strung them along. To get that money. So consider that as you read this 8th one. Do not love anybody too much. If you do not show it too much. It will give them an advantage over you. I love that one. This one is basically string them along.
Can you read that one again? Because I was typing out the caption to our meme that I'm about to post.
Do not love anybody too much. If you do not show it too much. It'll give them an advantage over you. And for this to come from like the we are all one, love is the highest vibration of all. Like this is, I'm getting a Bonacci Santos.
No, I don't say that.
Like, I'm getting a little bit of a feel from that though, right? Of like, I preach understanding and oneness and love, but then also like, don't ever love someone too much. Like they'll screw you over. They'll use it against you.
And that's dating advice from Manly P. Hall.
Only high vibrations allowed. So yes, and then here we are at the breastplate of the high priest, which was something completely new to me. You said it was a chocolate bar, and I kind of wanted to believe that.
Maybe that's where we got the concept from, but I knew about this because of John D. and the breastplate that the angels made him wear. They're supposed to serve as a talisman, and I know you looked up some extra stuff on it, right?
Nope.
Or you got everything from here?
Yeah. Everything I found out about it was from this article right here.
All right. Do you want to read it?
No.
Okay. Well, that was it, ladies and gentlemen. You're not gonna read it, bitch?
I don't have this one in front of me. Big. Here. But the interesting parts here was that the 4 it's basically 4x3. So the 4 rows represent the 4 elements, and that the 3 columns represented something else, and that the 3 times 4 was 12, and the 12 represented the zodiacs. But he also mentioned something that I looked up, and it was just another one of those like stated without any source, but that the 12 zodiac also represent like the 12 manifolds of the human brain. Well, there's not just 12, there is a bunch of them, but he just kind of says it like there's 12 here.
No, it was a ventricles or something like that, because I remember Googling the same thing when he said that same exact thing that you're saying, that it represents the 12. Da, da, da. He was talking about the number 12 in the brain, and it took me a while to find the piece of information that said 12. I ended up finding it, but it wasn't exactly how he had said it. It was like a little bit modified. You know what I mean? So
yeah, there's not just 12. I mean, he was talking about the brain being broken up into like 12 distinct sections, somewhat, but that's not really. There's no basis for that, but you know, you kind of have to be reading the article and you know, give up some of those analogies that he's making.
yeah. So let's see. We have nothing else here. Yeah, we can get into some of this stuff more in depth on other episodes, but essentially that was the All-Seeing Eye, Volume 2, number 1 through 6. And next, on the next episode, I want to do The Secret of the Golden Flower. Not because it's got to do with homunculus, but because I was reading it today, just going
You're
over
lying.
it.
You know it's because it has to do with homunculus.
No, dude, it gets deep. Like, it was really, like, blowing my mind today where I'm like, whoa, what does that mean? So I want to break it down with like you, Gabe, and somebody else to see where we can go with it. It's not that long, and I think it's got a lot of stuff that we can really go wild with, aside from it having some homunculus in it. So just a heads up on the next one. We'll either do that or we'll do something. We'll figure it out. There's plenty of old books that we can read. But
we got Edithorpa coming up too, which is another one had illustrations by John Augustus Knapp, the one that did those tarot cards.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, dude, you want to plug anything else while we're here?
ParanoidAmerican.com. Check out shirts, stickers, comics, soon to be games. Yeah, that's it.
Issue 2 is coming up soon. This will be out next week, this episode. So here we go, Cultist Monday.
Issue 2, it's got a whole bunch of, it's got XG, Johnny, it's got Sam Tripoli, it's got Alex Stein in it. It's got a bunch of people.
There you go. ParanoidAmerican.com, the101podcast.com. Thank you all for being here. And we'll catch you.
OccultBookClub.com.
Oh, that's right. Occult Book Club. Oh, OccultBookClub.com. Is it the Occult Book Club or Occult Book Club?
It's just OccultBookClub.com without the.
And that'll take you directly.
We could get the too, but
that'll get you directly to the YouTube channel videos. So, all right, bye.